What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
This is episode 36 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. Now, when you think of major things that happen in your life, and you think of things that go on, do you ever consider why they happen, or at what point you were built up to be able to withstand these problems or these issues? And then once you get through issues, how do you deal with them? And then once you deal with them, where do you go from there? What's the after effect of all this? And, these are questions that get asked all the time. And I was recently at a conference or a summit where this exact thing was addressed, and a lot of people were there, and they were talking about the various traumas that happened in their life. And I'm not talking a general, we got in a car wreck, and it's one or two things that occurred in their life. No, I'm talking about the heroes that we talk about and talk to on the show. The police officers, the firefighters, nurses, these folks who see things every day that normal people don't even consider, right? And if they do consider, they might see 2 or 3 times in their life. These police officers, these heroes of ours, they see these,
and then
once you get through issues, they see things, or they go
how
through
do you
things
deal with
themselves.
Them? And then once you deal with
the
them,
normal person,
where do you go from there? What's the after effect of all this?
Prepared for it.
And
but
these are questions that get asked all the time. And I was recently
some kind of superhero,
at
they have powers or anything like that,
a conference or a summit
for it. And not only
where
that,
this exact thing was addressed, and a lot of people were there, and they were talking about
where they've just done
the various traumas that happened in their life. And I'm not talking
becoming kind of more of a buffer and more of an armor for themselves.
We got in a car wreck, and it's 1 or 2 things
when you go
that
through
occurred
things like
in
that,
their life.
Think about
I'm talking about
there's
the heroes that we talk about
stories that we can tell,
and talk to on the show.
That we can
the
learn
police
from
officers, the
people who've gone through
firefighters,
things like this.
Nurses, these folks who see things every day that normal people
came up
don't
to
even
me and
consider,
really
right?
Impressed upon
and if they do consider, they might see 2 or 3
that
times in their life. These police officers, these heroes of ours, they see these
don't understand
multiple times a day. They see things, or they go through things themselves.
They can say, yes,
where
this happened
the
to
normal
me.
person would.
We always consider that my story is my story.
They're not
I've had
prepared
people on the
for
show
it.
who have said,
But the police officer, not necessarily because they're some kind of superhero, they have superpowers or anything like that, but they've prepared for it. Not only that, they have
they are a hero,
prepared their minds for it. They've also thought about it.
Now their story is their story.
Then there's a point of where they've just done it so many times.
Their story is
the scars are there, and they're actually becoming kind of more of a buffer and more of an armor for themselves,
and then the motivation and the inspiration that can come from that. And so
when you go through things like that, when we think
about
things like that, there's always
one of those
stories that we can tell, and always stories that we can learn from people who have gone through things like this.
Got the T-shirt to prove it, and wrote a book about it. And
one of the things that
Bridging the
came
Gap,
up
an inside
to
look
me
at
and really kind of
relationships
impressed upon me recently was this idea that people can have these traumas, they can go through these things, and people don't understand it, but they can be
He's done a ton of stuff.
They can say, yes, this happened to me.
Most people look at.
We always consider that my story is my story. I've had people on the show who have said, "Oh, I'm not a hero."
They look at it as
I don't know why anybody thinks of me as that. I just go to work or whatever.
To be looked up to and to be recognized.
We have to consider
He's a trainer.
They are a hero, and their story does matter. Now, their story is their story, but their story is for other people. Their story is to tell, so other people can have that knowledge of what's going on and how to address it themselves, and then the motivation and the inspiration.
And it's all for public
that.
Safety personnel.
And so today,
like I said,
I have a guest on the show who is
after 26 years retired.
One of those guys who has seen some stuff,
who's training,
done some stuff,
He's
got the T-shirt to prove it, and wrote a book about it. And the book's called Bridging the Gap, an inside look at communications and relationships after traumatic events.
Scuba diving,
and this
recreational and
this gentleman
safety.
is a
From beginner to
26-year
firearms,
law enforcement veteran.
Patrol rifle, precision
he's retired
rifle,
now.
Active
he's done a ton of stuff that
for law enforcement
most
and
people look at as far
he's also
as
knowledgeable in simulations, just first aid, and CPR.
They look at it as a
with all these things under his belt. You got to think, that's
to be looked
cool.
up to and to
scuba
be recognized.
Diving even yes,
he's
scuba diving even.
He's a
so
trainer.
It's actually pretty cool.
He teaches Bridging the Gap, the book. He teaches
training
a whole
coordinator of the Utah
series
Forensics
on this.
Divers Association,
and he does this for public safety personnel. He still
maintains his firearms instructor,
and it teaches ways to reduce PTSD, divorce, suicide,
and all that.
And it's all for public safety personnel.
Hey, you're retired.
Like I said, he's retired for 26 years, or after 26 years,
I got to write a book, and I got to keep doing stuff.
Patrol investigations.
You got to keep doing stuff.
He's a
you got to find your next mission.
He's now the CEO and founder of Great American West Tactical Consulting. Also provides training in
Glen Williams. How you doing, sir?
The area of scuba diving, recreational and public safety.
Thank you for that great introduction.
From beginner to instructor, he's a firearms, handguns, patrol rifle, precision rifle, active shooter response for law enforcement and civilian trainer. He's also knowledgeable in simulations, first aid, and CPR.
And we learned in the conference this week.
With all these things under his belt, you got to think, that's cool. Scuba diving, even? Yes, scuba diving, even. So it's actually pretty cool.
In fact, I got a notice.
He used to be the president and training coordinator of the Utah Forensics Divers Association.
He kept busy,
but he still maintains his firearms instructor and handgun and patrol rifle certificates and all that stuff that one would think, hey, you're retired. You should be retired.
You have a wife.
And this gentleman says, nope, I got to write a book and I got to keep doing stuff because
I do.
You got to keep doing stuff. You got to find your next mission. So
she gets frustrated.
Enough blathering from me.
Sometimes.
Let's just introduce today's guest, and that's Mr. Glen Williams. How you doing, sir?
It is. No, it's good. I'd rather be busy. And
thank you for that great introduction. I'd forgotten some of that stuff.
I tried that a little bit after my second.
You have all these things under your belt. You're going to forget what tools you have.
Right. So you did law enforcement for 26 years.
That's the one thing, and we learned in the conference this week is when people retire, they got nothing to do. And I watched my friends.
I had a heck of
half of them have.
Few months once when I was back.
In fact, I got a notice yesterday. Another one of them passed away.
3 major cases.
He wasn't that old.
2 weeks.
Wow.
He kept busy, but he had some health issues. But I have other friends that had no health issues.
The person backed me up was the chief, and he
turned to alcohol, turned to different things too.
Well, I was just a real brief recap. I had
I'm just trying to figure that out.
Sure, but you have a wife that'll make sure you point you in the right direction. I'm assuming, right?
It wasn't my area, but it was next.
I do now, and she is right on board with everything. She gets frustrated that I keep a little too busy sometimes.
That's pretty good, though.
Other officers, I told them I've got this entrance. You guys do it. And they did.
It is. No, it's good. I'd rather be busy than sitting back with nothing to do.
Now the high-speed chase is on. It starts going up.
Tried that a little bit after my second divorce, and that's a whole other story.
Right. A car between parked cars.
So you did law enforcement for 26 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so, like you said, I was in patrol.
Anyway, then I ended up on a major road.
I had a heck of
ended up at a ski resort
few months once when I was about a 2-year patrol officer. I had 3 major cases in 2 weeks, and I solved them all, took care of business. And on the third one, the person to back me up was the chief, and
he took off running behind a building.
Well, just a real brief recap. I had a burglary suspect
15 yards behind him
in progress on an early Saturday morning, and I knew it wasn't my area, but it was next to my area, and I happened to be near one of the entrances to that subdivision, so I called out.
It was shut.
Other officers, I told them, I've got this entrance. You guys take the other 2, and they did. And I got kind of lucky that day. He came out my entrance, and so now the high speed chase is on. It starts going up a U streets. A U-shaped street where we might have had 6 inches on each side of a car between parked cars.
But I got lucky.
And he's flying, and it happened to be the same street that my new chief lived on.
He was in his office.
But anyway, then I ended up on a major road and heading up. We ended up at a ski resort about 15 miles away.
And so he told them where I was at.
From there, he bailed out, and I had a foot chase through the trees and over the rocks and down the steep drop off that was probably 200 feet. He took off running behind a building, behind the lodge, actually. And as I got to the end of the lodge there, I was probably about 15 yards behind him. From the local high school, he disappeared. And I knew he didn't go in the woods because I could have seen him. And I knew he didn't go through the back swinging door because that was one of those heavy metal delivery doors. It was shut tight. It wasn't closing. And I found him. There were 2 cars in the parking lot, and he was under one of them. Sent the dogs and I ended up taking him into custody there. But back then, our radios didn't work up the mountains.
I didn't have to do anything today.
And so nobody knew where I was at. They knew where I'd headed. But I got lucky because there was the town marshal for the ski resort town, and he was in his office.
You got to trust yourself.
Watching me through binoculars on the landline of dispatch because it was before cell phone days.
There was a serious hit and run accident.
And so he told them where I was at, and all of a sudden the cavalry showed up. It was kind of fun. Doing that report, I ended up with 4 stitches in my knee going down those rocks.
Suddenly he left north out of the city
and getting out. But that was the first one.
And they put an ATL out for him.
A couple days later, there was a vehicle burglary from the local high school, and I happened to in my area, and it was a lot of open fields back then.
As I got to the restaurant,
and he disappeared into one of the fields, and so I coordinated the search, and one of the captains was by me, and when we finally caught him, sent the dogs in and a search team and got him. The captain says, "Hey, thank you for doing a good job. I didn't have to do anything today.
And I
appreciate
looked to my left,
that."
and here comes the suspect vehicle.
And
nice.
Then the third one.
All right, here we go.
We talk about those gut feelings.
I still had stitches in my knee.
You got to trust yourself. I did
just
back
hoping
then.
they didn't run or climb any fences or anything. But
there was a serious hit and run accident on the north part of the city.
The first 2 people
the south
back me were
the city at that time was probably about
Lieutenant
80,000 people.
And they backed me
suddenly
up.
He left north out of the city, the suspect,
that was in 10 days.
and they put an ATL out for him. Well, I was walking in on the south end with
about 2 weeks later,
about a 17-year officer and a guy that was younger than me to lunch. And as I got to the restaurant, and I got to the door, someone said, "Go back to the intersection."
So let's go back before we get too deep.
I actually listened for
let's
once
go back.
in my life.
Where
and I
who was little Glenn?
And
where did
as I walked out to the street,
or
drove my car out the street, I turned right. I'm sitting at a stop sign.
I grew up in a small town,
and I looked to my left, and here comes the suspect vehicle.
If I went 30 miles north or east, I was in Nebraska.
Yeah, I was like,
and it was a lot.
All right, here we go. I still had stitches in my knee, and I was just hoping they didn't run or climb any fences or anything. But
and the oldest always gets learned on.
As I called out and pulled over,
right.
The first 2 people to back me were the chief and
my dad was a teacher and a coach,
lieutenant over detectives,
and my mom was a secretary. And
they backed me up. And the chief looked at me and said, "Wow, you sure seem to be in the right place at the right time a lot lately." I mean, I was doing in 10 days, those 3 things. And I was also about 2 weeks later, I ended up a detective.
That's pretty good. That's quite the promotional exam there.
Jeez.
You had to go through. So let's go back before we get too deep into things. Let's go back. Where who was little Glenn? What did he do? Where did he grow up? Who was this little guy?
They told me I was too small.
I grew up in a small county, Eastern Colorado. If I went 30 miles north or east, I was in Nebraska.
260 pounders.
And it was a lot like Nebraska.
I couldn't knock them down. I could trip them up, and I just had to be
I was a good kid. I was the oldest.
That's
4 kids, and the oldest always gets learned on by the parents.
Anyway, that's how I grew up, and
that was me.
I learned a few things.
My dad was a teacher and a coach.
I actually went to college,
and my mom was a secretary. And
in college, I discovered
I grew up
girls
learning a lot about taking responsibility.
It took you until college to figure that out.
Well, I kind of had the girl,
but I was also a little guy. I wasn't very big.
Anything like that.
I graduated a whopping 135 pounds, I think.
And unfortunately, I made up for the first 2 years of college.
But
from a 3.9.
I learned a lot. I played football, wrestled, played baseball.
Oh, nice. Or not so much.
My favorite sport was baseball, but I was a pretty good wrestler. And believe it or not, they told me I was too small to play linebacker on the football team, so I played center.
Right.
But
so
did 135 pounds against these 260 pounders. I beat their ass.
I kind of morphed into asking.
I couldn't knock them down, but I could trip them up, and I just had to be smart.
Did you play outside all the time, or did you ever stay inside and do stuff?
So
didn't just stay
anyway,
inside?
That's how I grew up
outside all the time.
then I learned a few things. I went, I actually went to college. I started the first time
until I was about 12.
And when I got to college, I discovered, girls, alcohol. Wow, this is fun.
It took you till college to figure that out?
Getting bucked off the horses.
Well, I kind of had the girl thing figured out a little bit. I had never drank or did anything like that. I was pretty straight-laced. And unfortunately, I made up for it the first 2 years of college. I drank my way from a 3.9 GPA down to a 1.9 GPA.
Or basketball or football, or just running around.
Left on probation. It took me about,
did you
10
have any
years to make up for that and finally get my degree at a different school.
High school and all that?
Yeah.
So did you
have an idea what you wanted?
This is something that I'm noticing, and I kind of. I'm not sure. Morphed into asking this question all the time. So when you were a little kid, did you play outside all the time, or did you ever stay inside and do stuff?
Didn't you just stay inside?
And I got accepted to
school.
No,
all outside all the time.
They were
all the time.
Doubling the size of the school.
I mean, we used to. I grew up till I was about 12. I lived on a farm. So we were too much, and I bucking through the bales and getting bucked off the horses,
but kind of in a roundabout way,
climbing trees and running through the cornfield and then regretting it because we itched like crazy.
Sure.
But we were
so
never inside. You go through the whole vet, and even after I moved into town later,
more work than I thought it's going to be, or it's not.
We're out playing baseball or basketball or football or just running around. And we had our little mini bikes and we're out playing. And
did you have any? You played sports in school, in high school, and all that.
I worked really hard. Had a 3.9.
Did you have an idea what you wanted
year.
to do after you got out, or was
then
it
I started getting into the?
I'm not sure. I'm just going to go
classes and.
I actually wanted to be a veterinarian.
Chemistry in particular, and physics.
Yeah, and I actually worked with a veterinarian for 3 years, and I got accepted to school. Would have been eligible.
I learned to understand physics later when I learned to scuba dive.
Doubling the size of the school.
When you put it in
that's what I wanted to do.
Context,
I thought
a practical application.
I partied too much, and I took that away from myself.
Drink your way down,
but kind of in a roundabout way. I wanted to work with animals.
Figure things out. You played around a little too much. More than you should.
Animals that I was
sure.
And they kicked you
so
out. Or
you go through the whole vet thing. Did you realize, okay, this is more work than I thought it was going to be, or it's not necessarily what I want? And
academic probation,
physics and organic chemistry.
I've got to change some of the things that I've been doing.
I couldn't pick them up.
Rid of some of the friends I was hanging with that just partied all the time.
I worked really hard. Had a 3.9 GPA my first year.
Actually moved to Utah,
and then I started getting into the more advanced classes.
And then I moved to Utah to get away from
organic chemistry in particular and physics. I just couldn't do those.
Oh, I see.
That's probably
and so
funny thing though.
Venue sometimes.
I learned to understand physics later
I did
when I learned to scuba dive.
Then
that's kind of when you put it in a different
21 at the time.
Context, totally different.
Had a practical application.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
And so
you get into college.
At what point did you say,
drink your way down?
Maybe I should start looking
in a grade point average,
or did
figure things out? You played around a little too much, probably more than you should have.
I actually worked for the post office.
They kicked you out,
or delivered mail,
or did you just leave on your own?
And I left on my own. I was on probation.
Discovered the postal inspection service,
academic probation, and
that's what I want.
I've got to change some of the things that I've been doing.
And I actually applied,
got rid of some of the friends I was hanging with,
all of the tests
all the time.
But the last thing,
decided to actually move to Utah.
Sure.
Because I was in Colorado, and then I moved to Utah to get away from some of the bad habits and
during
that
my
I had developed.
Life. That changed things a lot.
You got to change your venue sometimes, I suppose.
And I did that.
I was in college, I wanted to learn scuba dive.
I think I was
let me
21 at the time.
Beat us at that
and
time.
I've been here in Utah ever since.
I lied and I did it anyway.
And so, at what point did you say, hey, maybe I should start looking at law enforcement, or were you looking at other stuff first?
I actually worked for the post office and delivered mail for 6 years. And during that time, I discovered the postal inspection service, and that's when I suddenly went
for law enforcement.
That's what I want to do
since then. But
I heard when I got to the, I actually applied
for the postal inspection service.
All of the tests and everything, but the last thing,
recruiter and told her I have diabetes. Is that a problem?
Let's go back a little bit.
But I hadn't finished my degree.
I have some diabetes type 1, and
they're like the FBI
during my life. That changed things a lot because I got that when I was 15
I worked full-time day, had 2 kids, went to
a couple
school
of things
night.
When I was in college. I wanted to scuba dive. They wouldn't let me
to have a decent GPA
because diabetes at that time was an automatic disqualifier. I lied and I did it anyway.
Finished my degree.
Okay.
With 2 kids.
I became a scuba diver, and then I became an instructor. And
but I actually got into a major I really enjoyed, which was
the best I could, and I became one of the top instructors in the country.
I learned,
and then I started teaching police and evidence diving.
So anyway, I got my
trained
and submitted it, and then I got a nice letter
worked on dive teams and
kept for 25 years, and then I wish I would have kept it because it would be in my book
since then. But anyway, when I got to
about 5 years ago,
applied for Postal Inspection Service.
Thank you for your application because your diabetes.
The recruiter told her I had diabetes. Is that a problem? She told me no. But I hadn't finished my degree
because your diabetes. We not feel you can handle the arts. So now it's required for this job.
Yeah, they're like the FBI, federal law enforcement, so they require
that you are a marginal employee.
So I went back to school
because I just got
I worked full-time day, had 2 kids, went to school at night,
the entire state,
and they don't let marginal people do. In order to have a decent GPA, I had to pull straight A's.
So you got to have that little.
And I did for 2.5 years
with disabilities.
I finished my degree
with 2 kids and family at home and having to work a job and the whole thing.
So I ended up around, and I was talking.
But I actually got into a major I really enjoyed, which was psychology.
And I said,
and I figured out what I want to do. Learned a ton.
I don't know what to do.
So anyway, I got my application in, submitted it, and then I got a nice letter one day, which I kept for 25 years, and then I wish I would have kept it because it would be in my book a copy.
They have openings out at
I threw it away about 5 years ago.
And I did.
Thank you for your application. Because your diabetes, you would not feel you could handle the strenuous physical activity for this job.
The exact number.
Right,
paragraph 2, because your diabetes would not feel you can handle the arduous hours required for this job. Paragraph 3, we also find you only that you are a marginal employee, which is BS because I just got an award for help and assigned to set up the training program for the entire state, and they don't let marginal people do that.
And as I walked up,
but you got to have that little catch-all. And that was the year the Americans with Disabilities Act came out, but nobody would take it on because it was brand new.
Not hire you.
So I ended up around and I was talking to a friend of mine while I was teaching scuba one night.
Diabetes come from?
And
that was been.
I said, "Man, I finally figured out what I want to do." In fact, they won't. I'll tell you, I don't know what to do.
The federal law enforcement had that until 15
he happened to be the
when
senior investigator for the district attorney's office.
Now they will take type 1 diabetic.
And he said, "They have openings out at Sandy PD. Why don't you go apply out there?"
I just kind of went,
and I did.
And I told you I'm competitive.
And they had 3 openings. I think we had
I can't do it, and I'll prove
over 500 applicants. I can't remember the exact number.
Right, when you're testing and standing room only sort of deal.
So after the mile and a half, as I'm
crossing about that with a couple other guests on here.
The closest guy is just coming off the first curve. So
it was
3/4 of a lap behind me.
What was funny is I showed up for
I looked at him and I said, "Now
the physical part of the test at the high school track, we had to run a mile and a half."
I ended up being the first one hired.
And as I walked up and I gave my name, the sergeant that was running it looked up and he goes, "Oh,
start working at Sandy.
You're the one with diabetes. They might not hire you."
With your scuba diving certificates
and all this different stuff. Heck, where did this stigma with diabetes come from?
We were not going to hire you.
That has been there until the last few years. In fact,
diabetes in your back
I'll tell you another. The federal law enforcement had that until 15 years after that point when somebody finally sued them and won.
Sandy City.
And now they will take type 1 diabetics. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, but I looked at him and I just kind of went, and I told you I'm competitive.
An interesting ride.
Right. If you want something done, tell me. I can't do it.
How was that? I mean, obviously, you're now.
That's the way I kind of live my life.
Mid to late 20s.
So after the mile and a half, as I'm crossing the finish line, I look up and the closest guy is just coming off the first curve.
With
so
2 kids?
3/4 of a lap behind me.
3 at that. Well, no, 2.
And I looked at him and I said, "Now try
and
not to hire
you're trying
me."
to figure out one. You just kind of figured yourself out.
And I ended up being the first one hired.
So doing what they're supposed to do, and you are now.
Cool.
32-year-old guy.
You get through that, and you start working at Sandy PD with your degree, with your scuba diving certificates and all this different stuff.
There's
with
a point
the postal
where you
inspection
realize
saying, "Nope,
means nothing.
We're not gonna hire you because of X, Y, Z." And with the diabetes in your back pocket, you said, "I'm going to
penalize me."
You start kicking around on Sandy, Utah, PD. Is that right?
In a way,
yeah, Sandy City, Utah.
I wasn't
a suburb of Salt Lake.
Behind years of my life experience.
Yeah.
Right.
And then that was an interesting ride.
Completely the way they did.
How was that? I mean, obviously, you're now you're mid to late 20s.
Is that right?
And so going through
32.
that and going through the whole
32 years
thing
old, starting out as
somebody's
police
just
officer with
critiquing
2 kids?
every move every single day.
3 at that. Well, no, 2 at that
32
time.
years old. How was that? How'd that?
And you're trying to figure out one. You just kind of figure yourself out, and most people are doing what you're supposed to do, and you are now 32-year-old guy.
But
you probably have
the way it was handled,
you might have a trainer that's younger than you, or an
really,
FTO or whatever that's younger, or whatever. And
hard. In fact,
there's a point where you realize age means nothing, and
didn't
they don't
matter
pay
what I
attention to
did.
that. Kind of.
They counted me down.
They
like
in some ways, I think that may have penalized
responding
me,
with my
actually.
FTO to
but I partially it benefited me in a way because
it's snowy.
I wasn't 21 years old, but behind years with no life
In
experience.
the hills on the east side of town, and as I'm going
and
up
I
the road in my car, I'm
do
sliding
things
back and forth, just
completely the way they did. Some things I
got
did a
up
little
to this
differently,
house,
but they worked.
There were 3 sets of footprints.
And
coming
so
off
going
the porch
through that and going through the whole thing
yard.
where
And then they
somebody's just
the opposite direction
critiquing your every move every single day.
So I jumped out
at 32 years old. How was that? How'd that?
And I was smart enough not to walk on them.
That part
but
was
I walked
fine
beside them and followed them
because I get that's the process.
Probably block and a half. And
but the way it was handled was really
okay.
And so we went up and we knocked on the door. And,
in fact,
answers. And
as I worked through things, it didn't matter what I did.
Neighborhood.
They counted me down.
It's pretty nice.
Like
and
one night, I'm responding with my FTO to
my son and a couple of friends in the basement
to a burglary.
And of course, we asked them, have they been
it's
out
snowy.
Says, oh, no,
I mean,
they haven't.
It's icy, and it's up in the hills on the east side of town. And as I'm going up the road in my car, I'm sliding back and forth, just trying to get up the hill.
Right.
And
we got up to this house.
Well, when they came up the
and
stairs,
there were
their cheeks are still red.
3 sets of footprints coming off the porch into the front yard.
Wet.
And then they headed away the opposite direction that we came
from.
from.
Grateful that she was a mom.
So I jumped out
responsibility
and I looked at those footprints
and be accountable for.
And I was smart enough not to walk on them.
But because I mean,
I walked beside them and followed them for about a block.
She was nervous,
probably a block and a half, and saw them disappear into a basement window of another house.
Did you do?
And so we went up and we knocked on the door. And this lady answers and
admitted to her.
And this is a fairly upper middle class neighborhood.
We were
it's pretty nice
because mom was.
And we asked her if you have any kids at home or anybody home. She goes, "Yeah, my son and a couple of friends are in the basement."
Sure,
And of course, we asked them, "Have they been out tonight?" She says, "Oh no, they haven't." And kind of turned around and pointed at the footsteps.
And these guys figured it out.
Are you sure?
Took some responsibility for it.
And she looked at that,
and they did. And so we got it worked out. But my trainer that night gave me a 1.
And she called the kids upstairs.
Right.
Well, when they came up the stairs, their cheeks are still red from being out in the cold.
Number 1,
they had their shoes off, but their socks were
wet.
I
get that.
And she kind of looked at them, and I'm grateful that she was a mom because it was still kids take responsibility and be accountable for what they did.
So they were going to get filled back in.
Because I mean, here's 2 officers in uniform asking about her kids
for evidence.
She was nervous,
and
number 2, but then she saw them, and she looked at them and said, "What did you do?"
Yeah.
Okay. And, sure.
The kids.
But
admitted to her what they did, and they went down and got stuff. And
okay,
we worked really well with kids because mom was cooperative. The kids were actually cooperative. They weren't bad kids.
What do I do? Yeah,
they did some stupid stuff that night.
At the end of
residential burglary, second-degree felony. Come on, guys.
Right? Yeah. And these guys figured it out and took some responsibility.
Actually, let me tell you my first night.
And they did, and so we got worked out. But my very first my trainer that night gave me a 1,
into
failing score.
Uniform ready to go.
For what reason?
My first night on the street with my new FTO.
Number 1, I didn't cover the footprints for evidence, which I get that.
Dark room
in the snow,
and
because it was still snowing when we got up there, and there was probably a foot of snow on the ground.
And then he stands
still snowing.
So they were going to get filled back
yelling at me. Says,
"Yeah,
you've got
so I didn't cover
around here as a cocky
them for evidence."
Know-it-all, and I'm going to change
number 2, he says, "Why'd you have to walk? You could have driven the car
academy. I've been here for months." Who did I?
Sure.
I piss off,
but
and I can't think of anything.
I don't know. If that's
and I
one worthy, but
I finally found out.
I agree with you,
and I anyway after that he
going, "Okay, what do I do?" Yeah, I know that.
That was his goal.
Actually, at the end of there were a couple things that happened. Actually, that happened regularly. With
back then,
I don't know what I did. Well, actually, let me tell you my first night. I'll tell you where it started.
Insecurities by arrogance.
My very first night, I walked into the office, uniform, ready to go. My first night on the street with my new FTO, and he pulls me in and sits me in a dark room
in my academy class,
and in this chair
as a comment,
uncomfortable as all get out. And then he stands over me and starts yelling at me.
Oh, really?
Yelling at me. Academy says, "You've got the reputation around here as a cocky, arrogant know-it-all, and I'm going to change that."
On all the tests.
In my head, I'm thinking, I just got out of the academy. I haven't been here for months.
By about half a point.
Who did I piss off?
Right.
But I realized,
and I can't think of anything. And I never did. Well, I finally found out where that comment came from. And anyway, after that, he beat me down. He beat me down. That was his goal.
They didn't like
it. And it was stated that night, I'm going to change that. A lot of people not going to be cocky and arrogant.
Personalities probably.
Back then, I didn't realize that I was arrogant. I hid my insecurities by arrogance. I kept people away from me by being arrogant. I didn't know that. It took me a few years to figure that out, and so I really have worked on that since then.
He failed,
but I want somebody
called into the chief's
in my academy class.
I'm kind of real timid.
Had written that as a comment in my workbook.
Oh, really?
My academy book. Yeah, that I was cocky, arrogant, know-it-all. I scored the highest on all the testing and everything, and that was one of the big highest academic awards. And I got that by about half a point.
And what am I going to do?
But I realized, looking back,
job,
they'd ask a question, and
the chief
pop off the answer.
Sit down for a moment.
And I really didn't wait for anybody else to have a chance.
And then he asked me some questions.
And so they didn't like that. Somebody didn't like that. And I get a lot of people, especially with type A personalities, probably was offensive. And I kind of looked at it, but I did not know that at the time. Really? And so that kind of rode me hard there for a while. In fact, my first FTO
experience, and I don't remember what I said,
failed me.
But I came up with something.
Yeah, he failed me. And I got called into the chief's office, and I walked in, and I'm kind of real timid. Yeah, there was no arrogance left in me then. That's for sure.
Right.
And
when you're at the desk,
I actually looked at the chief
and officers during the day.
I'm stressing because I've already quit a job at the post office. I'm not sure if I can go back. I don't have a job. I got 2 kids, third on the way,
with different trainers.
And what am I going to do? And I looked at it and I said, guess I'm not at the job, huh?
The first FTO,
and the chief sat there and
myself physically.
Sit down for a moment. Let's talk about that.
In fact, he actually set me up one night.
And then he asked me some questions, and one of them was,
I was called to a fight in progress. 3 guys fighting in the park.
Tell me about a good experience you had on your FTO.
Parked in the parking lot.
And I kind of looked at him and sat there and thought for a few minutes.
Started walking up. These 3 guys, and they're all over. And they're all.
And he says, "Well, tell me about your best experience." And I don't remember what I said, but I came up with something. He looked at me and said, "That's your best experience." I said, "Yeah." And he says, "You know what?"
I told him to stop.
What we're going to do
commands
is we're going to put you at a desk
close. I'm looking. Okay, I think I can take 1, maybe 2 of them.
And when you feel when you're at the desk, you can go out with other officers during the day.
Been doing
like you did on FTO. Get back comfortable. When you get back comfortable, we'll put you through another FTO.
And so I got ready to
with different trainers.
Yeah,
and that's what he did.
And as I pulled my weapon,
I went out.
All of a sudden, my trainer behind goes,
the first FTO was concerned I wouldn't handle myself physically.
I'm looking around going,
and in fact, he actually set me up one night at a park.
I don't know how I got what the fuck?
I was called to a fight in progress. 3 guys fighting in the park. And so I drove over there, parked in the parking lot, went up tactically sound, and walked up. And as I started walking up,
and that's
these 3 guys, and they're all over. They're all 6 feet plus, probably 220, 230 pounds, big guys, weightlifting looking guys.
Right.
And they turned and all started marching on me.
I was
6 foot,
185
told them to stop. Gave them verbal commands.
6'2",
and when they start getting pretty close, I'm looking, okay, I figure I can take 1, maybe 2 of them.
I think there's pretty big difference.
Because I've done some studies throughout the years, and I've been doing martial arts for many years.
Was my chief actually removed my
3, no way. I'm not dumb. And so I got ready to pull my weapon to force him down. And as I'm pulling my weapon, And all of a sudden, my trainer behind me goes, "How to roll? How to roll?" I ended up on going through a second FTO, and I'm looking around, going like when going out with the officers on the streets. I got in fights. I got all the things. I don't know how good. What the fuck? What are you talking about?
What are you doing?
And then they stopped. 50-foot chases and fights. And it turns out they were buddies of his from the gym, and he'd set me up.
That's pretty good.
Without telling me. That they won't happen anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And that scared the hell out of me because one thing he was if I had not listened, and I've got hyper focused on them, I could have shot. I'm
assuming at some point you got you got through the whole FTO thing.
And, I was 6 foot, 185 pounds. Yeah, they actually wanted to accelerate me the second 225, 230 pounds. Been failed once. They had to go. I think there's a pretty big difference there.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I got through that one. I became a solo officer. What happened then was my chief actually became my trainer from the training program on my own about a year. From the training program, field training program. Yeah, about a year. I know he was out for a year or two. 3 incidents happened all in 10 days. Then they let me go, and I ended up on going through a second FTO, and I did an officer. Like when going out with the officers on the streets, I got in fights. I got all the things that they were worried about I wouldn't handle. In fact, over the years, I've been in before that. 40 or 50-foot chases and fights. I haven't lost any. I didn't intend to do that.
Did you figure that?
That won't happen anymore.
That you failed.
Right.
Did you figure that was
that was the one thing he was worried about? He said
that it you weren't treated fairly.
You get through that, and I'm assuming at some point you got
taking the whole arrogance thing.
You got through the whole FTO thing,
saying he's going to run with it, and
were able to be out solo. Huh?
They actually wanted to accelerate me the second one, but because I had been failed once, they had to go. I had to go through the whole thing again.
I think.
I did got through, and then I became a solo officer, and then I was older. And shortly after became a solo officer, I've been on my own about a year. They were looking for a certain kind of guy. About a year. And that's when those 3 incidents happened all in 1 week. Deep down, 10 days. And then so I'd been an officer, patrol officer for about a year and a half on my own. And then I had about a year of the other FTO and stuff before that.
Right.
Sure.
And then that's when I ended up in detectives.
There's that, like you said, that A-type.
Did you figure that
and people that
first FTO that you failed?
And I think
did you figure that was
a level of we can do it, but
that it
you
weren't treated fairly because of the whole idea of him taking the whole arrogance thing personally and saying he's going to run with it and change it, and that was the business. I guess the main point of
you're not on our level yet.
Not passing
not on our level
was
yet.
Because of that. You think?
Well, there's that level.
I think that had a big part to do with it. I also think I look at it like and I didn't quite mesh with them.
You get invited to somebody's house.
They were looking for a certain kind of guy.
You go there.
I wasn't that kind of guy.
You don't just walk in the house and sit at the head of their table.
Deep down, I really was, but I didn't.
Their table. And so,
portray it.
And if you do that,
that's what's funny is I'm looking at that and they're hammering me for being arrogant. And they were some of the most arrogant guys I ever met.
Sure,
but to have that idea that you're just going to go.
There's that, like you said, that A-type personality and people that it's always have to be right.
You're the guest of honor,
and I think there's a level of
there's a kind of a
we can
two
do
sides
it,
to that.
You're not. You haven't reached the place where you're allowed to do that yet, or whatever the case is.
You expect it.
Yeah,
and I think that's one of the things
unfortunately
we deal with today in today's society.
Kind of standard throughout
the millennials or whatever
business,
right?
Where they're entitled to this or they're entitled to that.
On our level yet. You're not on our level yet.
We just have to. We have to understand that
there's that level. I think there's a thing where
you all say, "Well, you're entitled."
And I look at it.
I know you're entitled.
If you get invited to somebody's house,
I'm entitled,
and
I see what you're doing. But I don't like it.
You go there and you don't just walk in the house and sit at the head of their table.
On the other side of the coin,
this is their table.
And so, all have to understand.
And if you do that,
you cannot
there's going to be some questions. So what you do is you go in there and you wait for them to tell you where you're going to sit. Hey, you're going to sit here. Okay, cool. I'll sit here. Thank you very much.
You need to put other people first.
But to have that idea that you're just going to go and you're going to sit right at the head, you are entitled to the head of the table because you were invited here. You're the guest of honor.
Solid look at ourselves. Sometimes we
there's a kind of a two sides to that. I think on one side you should have some confidence,
don't match up with,
but having that arrogance where you expect everything. And I think that's one of the things we deal with today in today's society. And we talk about the millennials or whatever,
self-awareness,
where they're entitled to this or they're entitled to that
internally and everything else.
we just have to understand that we do the same thing. I get that. We all say, well, that's like you're entitled to this. And the reason I know you're entitled because
finish FTO and go on patrol.
I'm entitled. Sure. And I see what you're doing, but I don't like it. So I'm going to project it on you. To an extent, I think there's but on the other side of the coin is that we all have to understand that you cannot be arrogant. You can't be egotistical. You can't go in there just expecting that, hey, everything is owed to you. So you need to put other people first. And I think that we don't realize that we do it sometimes.
That was part of the
if we all took a pretty solid look at ourselves, sometimes we'd be able to see a lot of the things that we do don't match up with our own thought processes, the way that we expect others to act. And we go and do things too. So having that self-awareness, that point where you start looking at yourself and internally and everything else makes a big difference.
Where's my Tahoe?
And I get that.
6 weeks. Come on.
No, that's like back then.
It's funny. It's not just law enforcement that does that. It's in law enforcement. However, that's not only.
And I actually, that incident actually curtailed my career quite a bit.
There's teams
because there were certain areas I didn't dare put myself, because those guys were still, they got promoted to sergeant, lieutenant,
sales, or whatever.
I didn't dare put myself underneath them because even on my second FTO, they came back and tried to have me fired.
They have,
even though I was doing
all the
everything
spots
correctly.
in their group filled. That's so weird anymore.
Yeah, people do
that was part of the ego of that time and that group. They don't want anybody. And they were a tight group, and I was never going to fit in. To be honest, I didn't want to.
It's like I said, it's not just law enforcement. It is there, but that's not the only place it is. And
but you're so right. I mean,
you just have to learn how to navigate people. And you just have to, and that's just people that it is. It's not professions.
Oh yeah,
it's people.
And I remember later in my career when these new guys come in and I have a brand new Tahoe, and they'd be going, "I want mine. Where's my Tahoe?"
There's a lot of good.
You've been here 6 weeks. Come on.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's not just law enforcement that does that. It's in law enforcement. However, it's not only. There's places everywhere. Every profession you can think of, especially where there's teams that are being built or teams that are working together or whatever, whether it's business or it's sales or it's whatever. You're going to find that sort of thing.
You said about a year.
There's a group.
Yeah, about a year.
They have enough people. They have
a year and a half.
They have all the spots in their group filled, and they don't need any more to come in.
10-day period where
whatever the case
I was totally
is.
Well, and they don't want anybody to come in and rock the boat because they're comfortable where they're at.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, it's not just law enforcement. It is there, but that's not the only place it is, and it can get.
And I truly feel
you just have to learn how to navigate people, and you just have to, and it's just people that it is. It's not professions. It's people that do that, and. I don't know about you. One thing I've learned about people is we're all flawed. We're all. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of good in all of us, but
after I got out,
there's a lot of flaws in all of us.
After I got into detectives,
the way to get around that, or one way to get around that, is number one, to get out of the ego, because that does nothing but cause problems.
Right, absolutely.
And then come from our heart, because that's where you actually connect with people.
Agreed.
And that was another.
So
one.
you're doing solo work for what you said about a year,
and about a year, and it was a year and a half.
Never had but
that's when that 10-day period where I was totally listening to everything that worked.
It's weird how we get in our own heads sometimes.
And that we go out and get your car and go out to the intersection. I was totally listening, and I truly feel we call it
hurt the most, the one
going with your gut.
Feel the most.
But it's really inspiration is what it is.
When we start getting in our own
but we
head,
get that in our gut wherever we feel that, and when we listen to it, amazing things happen.
And it's not necessarily
after I got out of after I got into detectives, I'll be honest, I went in way too early. I was way too inexperienced.
But when we let it start ruling our lives,
I had a huge learning curve.
So what does your mind come up with?
And that was another one. I had my sergeant there was similar to my FTOs
for that.
And
that's I actually did that when I wrote my book.
He never had a good.
Took me about a year to write it.
But it was
to a publisher,
kind of interesting,
an agent,
and I let that beat me down until I didn't trust myself anymore.
And this was
it's weird how we get in our own heads sometimes, that we let ourselves make the decisions. Our brains,
the
wrong portion of it,
entire manuscript,
the one that seems to be hurt the most, the one that seems to feel the most. That one starts making the decisions, and we can't. When we start getting in our own head, and we start saying, "Oh yeah, they are right. You are stupid," or "Yeah."
I had the submission paperwork,
and we start adjusting things, and it's not necessarily for the positive.
Or
well, I've discovered something about
they would add to my
head.
book.
It's a great computer, and if we use it for the computer,
one
it
of
is.
them that actually ended up doing that was Randy Sutton.
But when we let it start ruling our lives, think about it. So, what does your mind come up with?
And,
that won't work because
and I had
you can't do that because you're not
my
good
mind
enough
is
for
telling me
that.
you don't have enough.
Right.
You only have 2. You need 3.
That's. I actually did that when I wrote my book. I had my book. Took me about a year to write it. And then I pitched it to a publisher, an agent, and a filmmaker. And all 3 wanted it.
2020.
And this was pitched it in November.
And one day I woke up and I
of 19.
20 minutes worth of work left to finish this up.
And
what are you doing?
The publisher wanted my entire manuscript, not a chapter, not a couple pages. He wanted the entire thing.
Takes your mind about 5 seconds.
I had it finished in December.
I'm going to go.
And I had to do some submission paperwork.
3, 2, 1.
And I had the submission paperwork all done except the last 2 pages. The last 2 pages were references.
Sent an email to the publisher, attach my manuscript,
recommendations that they would add to my book.
And that was on Thursday.
One of them that actually ended up doing that was Randy Sutton.
That I had spoken
with. He was on the podcast 3 or 4 episodes ago. Yeah.
He sent me an email back saying,
I
look forward to seeing
and I had a couple,
and then
but my mind is telling me you don't have enough. You only have 2, you need 3.
In person.
And I'm not sure they're good enough.
When it would be a good time.
And I sat on that book
Saturday through Tuesday.
I could have turned it in March. I sat on it till November of 1920.
He sent me, I'm going to send you a sample contract. That way, if they do
of 2020
the contract.
And one day I woke up and I went, "You got 20 minutes worth of work left to finish this up. What are you doing?"
Right, you're just about there.
Friday.
And then I used a little trick that
this was on Wednesday.
In the meantime,
person who's going to send
takes your mind about 5 seconds.
On Friday, I was working on my garage and I got back into my house.
I'm going to go do that now.
I had a message and it says,
4, 3, 2,
congratulations,
1, go. And I went down. 20 minutes later, I finished on my laptop.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Sent an email to the publisher, attached my manuscript and my submission documents.
No for 8 months.
And that was on a Thursday.
You're not ready.
Yeah,
I called the gentleman that I had spoken with.
Way too much.
Told him I had sent it. And he said,
"No, correct me if I'm wrong."
Back said, "Great. I'll look forward to seeing it."
There was a documentary producer.
Says, "I'd like to talk with you in person and explain the process to you when it'd be a good time."
On the podcast,
and I was working
Wounded Blue itself
Saturday through Tuesday at the time. So I said next Wednesday would be great.
About the book, is that correct?
And
yes, I did.
He sent me. I said, "I'm going to send you a sample contract. That way, if they do offer you
what is
contract, then you'll have it."
Interesting. And
on the following
filmmaker with the publisher,
the following Friday,
the documentary. So
this was on Wednesday when I talked to him in person. He was going to send me the sample contract. On Friday, I was working out my garage and I got back into my house and I had a message and it says, "Congratulations, they accepted your book yesterday. I'm going to send you a real contract."
And he says,
"Oh, that's pretty cool."
Yeah, because I didn't let my mind say no this time. I had let it say no for 8 months.
Okay,
you're not ready.
Yeah,
it's not
good
enough.
We do it to ourselves. Way too much.
You need to make a feature film out of this.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
And he told me you didn't want to break it up.
There was a documentary producer. He actually produced the video, the movie that Randy Sutton talked about on the podcast,
so
the Wounded Blue itself.
I don't have a clue how to go
and
feature film.
you approached him about the book. Is that correct?
Getting a documentary either.
Yes, I did.
And you were thinking, hey,
now you have some work ahead of you.
Is this possible to make into a documentary?
Can't talk yourself out of it.
What is it he said?
Let's talk about it. Where did the book idea come from? Other than obviously, hey, I've got 26 years
publisher. She told me I needed a documentary. So I finally called Jason.
And where did that come from?
And who's done award-winning documentaries, and he did the one for the Blue.
That makes you who you are. That makes you the literary genius that you are, or the curled up in a ball crying.
Says, "I don't think I can make a documentary out of this. I just don't think that would be right." I went, or a little okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, my heart's going, darn, I'm disappointed. He says, "No, you need to make a feature film out of this."
PTSD.
And there were some he told me you didn't want to break it up
teach my class as I tell the story, I'll start
the person talking and stuff that would break it up too much.
Because I get to be me. And if it hurts, it hurts, and I don't have to hide stuff anymore.
So now I've got to start over because I don't have a clue how to go back into a feature film.
What kind of classes do you teach?
But I didn't have a clue how to go about getting a documentary either. So
I teach one on communication.
So now you have some work ahead of you. You can't talk yourself out. So let's talk about it. Where did the book idea come from, other than obviously, hey, I've got 26 years of experiences that will really make a difference. And
as I went through my
where did that come from? And let's talk about some of the stuff that's in there that makes you who you are, that makes you the
hunting a serial rapist,
literary genius that you are, or the curled up in a ball crying because you don't know if you made a difference in life.
But everyday cops see,
or a little of both.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I went through my career.
Right. And I didn't know that back then. We learned was
PTSD.
Suck it up.
There are some things, and even today when I stand up teaching my classes, I tell the story. I'll
start our spouse in on.
But guess what? That's okay because I get to be me. And if it hurts, it hurts, and I don't have to hide stuff anymore.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Back in the day,
what kind of classes do you teach?
You don't end up in that
other than firearm stuff.
You need to talk to your spouse.
I teach one on communication and relationships after traumatic events to help prevent PTSD, divorce, and suicide. I call it bridging the gap, obviously.
They're gruesome. They're nasty. But you need to keep that line of communication.
That's what I focus on now because as I went through my career, I
never told us how.
Right. Well, like any other officer, and I start off my class saying, "Look, I wasn't on a task force hunting a serial killer.
First FTO, I shut down.
Hunting a serial rapist. I'm not a federal officer that's been in 16 shootouts or anything like that.
I didn't want.
I'm just an everyday guy, everyday cop.
There were some things that happened,
but everyday cops see so much,
a little bit scary.
That eventually you can eat them away.
And especially when I got out on my own.
Right. And I didn't open up back then. What we learned was suck it up, buttercup. You don't need to say shit. In fact, we had a 2-hour class when I was in the academy, and they brought our spouse in on relationships.
I'm watching the back.
And they said, the divorce rate in law enforcement is extremely high.
They go in, and he's not there. Well,
okay.
Came out the back.
In order to keep it so you don't end up in that category,
moved out from behind the
you need to talk to your spouse and keep communications open. Now, there's going to be things you can't talk about because it's an ongoing investigation. There's going to be things that you don't want to talk about because they're gruesome, they're nasty.
I'm standing in ivy that's probably.
But you need to keep that line of communication open so you don't get divorced. They never told us how.
As I look down to my left,
never told us how. Well, then going through my career.
And I'm going,
especially like the first FTO, I shut down. I didn't want my wife stressing about me being unemployed.
Got back behind.
What am I going to do for the family? I didn't want her stressing about stuff. There were some things that happened that were,
as he went out the window, the shotgun
a little bit scary,
and it fell behind
some of them a lot. Yeah. And especially when I got out on my own,
that makes a difference.
Some stuff started happening.
I didn't know that at the time.
Had one guy, he was armed with a shotgun.
That could have probably saved my life.
I'm watching the back of it's a 2-story condo. I'm watching the back. Guys are going in the front.
And that was actually fairly
they go in and he's not there. Well, he never came out the back. I didn't know where he was. But he had a shotgun.
Right. And
so I kind of moved out from behind the tree on me, and I'm standing there looking around trying to figure out where the hell he went.
You put enough Band-Aids, you put enough
and this little kid that's on his bike riding by goes, it's right there.
On something. You're eventually not going to be able to
see. I'm standing in ivy that's probably
other junk in the way.
Close to knee deep.
No big deal.
And as I look down to my left, about 6 feet away from me, I see the toe of a cowboy. That's all I can see.
So anyway, as we go through my career, I got
a little pucker factor on that one.
Sure, yeah.
I hurried, got back behind the tree and called him out and notified him on the radio, and they came running around and we got him out. I got lucky because as he went out the window, the shotgun caught and it fell behind the couch.
On her, she was depressed.
That makes a difference.
Which I didn't know that at the time, but
I raised the kids by myself.
That could have probably saved my life.
Right,
I'm pretty sure. Anyway, guess what? Those things like that, and that was actually fairly minor.
Right.
But on the other hand, extremely potentially dangerous.
Right, and that's more of a psyche thing, something that just kind of sticks with you. And you put enough. You put enough Band-Aids, or you put enough tape, or you put enough, sticky notes on something. You're eventually not going to be able to see or be able to use it because there's so much other junk in the way.
Yeah, no big deal. That's what I said, but I never told my spouse about that,
right?
Because I didn't want her to worry about me getting killed. So anyway, as we go through my career, I quit talking.
You guys had developed years ago wasn't there.
I didn't share stuff at work.
It was the fact,
and there were things that my spouse had
didn't know how to deal with the changing of
contributed,
life, and you just kind of,
like they always are. But what I've learned since then
on things, and
I could blame everything on her. She was depressed, crawled in bed. I didn't see her for basically 7 or 8 years.
In fact, back then we didn't know
I raised the kids by myself, worked 4 jobs because she quit working.
Early 90s.
Life was tough. But guess what? It really wasn't.
I don't even.
And I can't change her. I can only change me.
Right.
You would say they're just depressed.
I quit talking, and then I ended up filing for divorce because I just told her I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
She crawled into bed. She was depressed,
and that's one time in my life that I will admit now. At the time, I didn't see it,
and then it just progressed.
I quit.
Worse. Anyway, I went through that, and then I went through and tried.
And that's probably
slow learner.
One of maybe 3 times in my life.
And it wasn't because of you didn't love her, or there was that thing that friendship you guys had developed years ago wasn't there. It just
I'm a 2-time.
It was the fact that you both didn't know how to deal with the changing of life, and you just kind of, whether you grew apart or you had different views on things, and the lack of communication probably was a huge factor.
Huge. In fact, back then we didn't even know what depression really was.
Things to open myself up.
This was back in like
self-accountable
early 90s,
and I'm huge now.
And start my class. I don't even recall hearing the word depression at that point in my life.
Because we're not
you would say something, they're just depressed
whatsoever.
I'm depressed, and you'd hear that, but you wouldn't hear depression as an ailment.
Exactly.
As I was going through,
she crawled into bed and she was depressed, and started with postpartum depression when my son was born.
Well, we were talking about,
and then it just progressed.
Just how
anyway, I went through that, and then I went through and tried again because I'm a slow learner.
Based off of,
and I didn't change myself. And I ended up divorced a second time. After that time, I really spent some time up in my cabin
internally. You're trying to
really got looking into
you're closing things off from not letting.
Now I'm a 2-time loser, which is what I
you're dealing with your own issues.
Right.
Your first wife,
and you're not a loser if you get divorced, but that's how I looked at it.
There was no, and so it's just kind of the growing.
I started looking, okay, what can I do to
or the growing apart of anybody, because you're not willing to
started making the changes
yourself
in me.
And so
I went through some
that was what you were saying,
things to open myself up, be self-accountable.
You were talking about how do you
and I'm huge now. In fact, I start my class off on talking about self-accountability.
So that's where it came from. It started with
because if we're not self-accountable, we can't make any changes whatsoever.
Right.
And a little better, that's where I started.
But a lot worse than others.
As I was going through, and I kind of got rambling, so I'm not sure what where I was going with the question now.
Well, we were talking about just how life, how that
all you told do is talk
that growth and how we become who we are based off of. We have our
It's kind of funny.
You're
young.
You're not looking at yourself internally. You're trying to. You're closing things off from not letting people in because you're dealing with your own issues. Your first wife was dealing with her issues, and yet there was no communication. And so it was just kind of the growing apart of 2 people, or the growing apart of anybody, because you're not willing to open yourself up. And so that was what you were saying is in the book. You were talking about how do you bridge that gap, and so
exactly, and that's where it came from. It started with that, and then my second marriage was
because hey, I was kind of
a little better in some ways, but a lot worse in others. But the big issue there,
you were talking about, you had that arrogance thing, so that probably didn't go completely away.
I remember my second wife telling me, "Why can't you talk to me? All you do is talk surface talk."
When I got done with that marriage, there was no arrogance.
And I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I started doing the same thing. And, but it's kind of funny because she really didn't like cops.
You have this
this
thing, and you even said that you feel that
she married one, and then she was not shy about telling me. She'd tell me, cops were just guys got picked on in high school, and now they're getting even.
You have failed. You're supposed to,
and stuff like that.
You're supposed to work.
That was just daily.
However, you hear about this all the time.
Tirade. I will give her credit. She was a great. My first wife, by the way, passed away.
There's a huge number
after we were divorced. So I will give my second wife credit.
So as we go through this, we don't even realize that
at the time.
If we would open up, and if we don't just internalize everything, and we keep so quiet, like I don't even.
I mean, that's that thing where
I'm not even going to tell you about it.
you were talking about you had that arrogance thing, so that probably didn't go completely away. However, you may have mitigated it a little bit.
That'll help reduce the PTSD.
Yeah, at that time,
if we don't,
right.
I mean, when I got done that, there was no
I'll tell you right now, if you get PTSD and you don't deal with it,
but you go through that, but then
you be a lot harder saving a marriage.
You have this. This thing where, and you were even you even said that you feel that if you get divorced or whatever, at least I know I did. You get divorced, you feel like you failed.
When I was living up
you have failed. You're supposed to. These are supposed to work, and however you hear about things all the time, and police officers. There is and you said it in the academy. There's a huge number. Then
she started out when I was writing the book. I put a little more detail in there.
Divorces that occur, and so as we go through this, we don't even realize that.
I have no
if we would open up, and if we don't just internalize everything, and we keep so quiet, we're like, oh, I don't even want to relive it, so I'm not even going to tell you about it. We can't do that. We have to, and that gets it off our chest. That gets it out there.
I don't hide that stuff.
That'll help reduce the PTSD that we end up getting if we don't.
But
I mean, those are, and then I'll tell you right now, if you get PTSD,
I know exactly what you're thinking,
and you don't deal with it, it's going to be a lot harder saving a marriage.
I really prefer it this way.
Obviously, I'm lucky now because I'm married again. My third wife, she knows everything about me.
Right.
When I was writing the book, I would tell her stuff. And when I was living up in my cabin, I actually taught myself how to take a traumatic event
and
rephrase it so it could be safely shared with a spouse.
You're a lying sack of garbage.
And I at least
that might be what's going through your brain.
But then she started out when I was writing the book, I put a little more detail
hurting
in there.
A kid or killing somebody or doing something. I
would share them with her, and she, like say, I have no secrets with my wife now, none at all. And she, in fact, she made the comment earlier today. I went downstairs and she said something. I don't hide my feelings at all. It shows right on my face.
I didn't like
you, dislike you. If I agree with you, if I think you're a lying piece of shit.
Right.
I don't. I used to hide that stuff, especially when you're on the street. Kind of had to.
Right.
But now she says that's what I love about you. I know exactly what you're thinking. And she does, and I really prefer it this way.
Kids are in high school.
Obviously at work, you can't do that sometimes, especially if you're a detective doing interviews and interrogations and stuff.
Right. They're lying to you. They did whatever, diddled a kid or murdered somebody or whatever, and you got to talk to them. Oh man, I sympathize with you, and I'm on your bull crap. You're a lying sack of garbage. At least that might be what's going through your brain, because you've got video of them, hurting a kid or killing somebody or doing something like that, and they're just lying and lying and lying. And
it's like one case that it hurt bad.
Let me see.
I got called on a homicide.
An evil person, that's what it
is. And I didn't work homicide.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I got called up there because the kid that was the suspect said he knew me.
He was
I had no idea who it was or anything until I got there. And when I got there, it turns out that the lady who had been killed
over to the place I didn't know about
was my kid's babysitter. When they were younger. My kids are in high school now, but she had babysat them for. She lived down the street from us and ran a daycare.
Adjudicator on his mom's,
and
they did a good job.
They had found her strangled, dead. And the kid that knew me, was the suspect.
I had to recuse myself from the case.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Knew them.
And I mean, he asked me to give quite a history. And this is, I can't remember what chapter in my book this is, but yeah, when I saw
on the way down, I'm having to act like I'm his best bud.
Bawled my eyes out, started crying.
Oh yeah.
And we're talking about, and I couldn't say anything about the case because I didn't want to jeopardize it.
Let me see.
So we're just talking like we're best buds and talking.
An evil person.
That's what he was doing in school, and all this stuff. And I figured,
anyway,
I figured, well, if I can be friendly,
he was suspected.
Hold it together.
At the time, he was not suspected. They thought his dad committed suicide.
Choke him.
And their house had burned down. That's why they had moved over to the place I didn't know about.
I was in my detective car. I didn't have a
cage.
He
was a suspect in that arson. Later, after looking at the facts,
and I'm just chatting my girlfriend,
made him a suspect in his father's death, but because he'd already been adjudicated on his mom's, because the city I worked in, they did a good job, and he was convicted.
And I had no idea how that went, because after
but
the office,
I had to recuse myself from the case.
It was done.
I knew them, so they asked me to give him a ride down to the station so he could be interviewed by detectives when they got done where they were at.
Right.
So on the way down, I'm having to act like I'm his best bud. You know, and we're talking about, and I couldn't say anything about the case because I didn't want to jeopardize his mom. So we're just talking like we're best buds and talking sports and talking what he was doing in school and, you know, and all this stuff. And I figured money and stuff. That's deep down. I figured, I've not even read if I can be friendly and hold it together. I wonder. Because in reality, I wanted to reach over the seat.
You can only imagine somebody like that would have some kind of mental health issues.
But
and that's exactly what.
In fact, I was in my detective car. I didn't have a cage. I'm mental health.
Yeah, he's right next to
me.
He actually got
we're just chatting like we're old friends. But I figured if I was friendly and he was there, he might when it got really to the interviews, he might loosen up a little bit and say something. I don't know. Right. And I have no idea how that went because after I got him to the office, he died.
Separated from it.
So in your book, you ended up with
but I was grateful that they did convict him.
Kind of a closer on each chapter.
He did
on this story in particular, I want to read that part.
What was his reason?
There are several things we can do to minimize the effects of such traumatic incidents. One option is journaling.
Okay.
But
write the experiences.
He wanted to move back in with his mom.
This is a common tool used by counselors
and she wasn't going to let him.
Feelings out.
And
the writing
there was
process
money
will bring
involved.
Up feelings, but will also make
he wanted her to give him some money and stuff. That's and I've not even read the report.
The experiences with someone you trust.
Yeah,
this could be
I
a
wonder.
Counselor, a peer support team
you can
member,
only imagine
friend,
somebody like that would have some kind of mental health
or
issues.
like we were just talking about.
And that's exactly what
or your spouse.
They got him a lighter
choose someone
who
will listen and let you work through the feelings you have.
He actually got out.
Get these feelings out.
Had a child, and then he died,
PTSD.
and he was young.
If we don't share. We are putting up barriers to communication, which leads to problems in our relationships.
Right. And so he was younger than 40, and he died.
So you in your book, you ended up with kind of a recap and a kind of a closer on each chapter. And on this story in particular, I want to read that portion where it says,
some of the bigger cities,
there are several things we can do to minimize the effects of such traumatic incidents. Sure. One option is journaling. Write the experiences down to get them out. This is a common tool used by counselors and helps get feelings out. The writing process will bring up feelings, but will also make them easier to talk about later.
True.
A second option is to talk about the experiences with someone you trust. This could be a counselor, a peer support team member, a friend, a coworker, or like we were just talking about, your wife,
right?
Or your spouse or whoever.
And you said that's something that
choose someone who will listen and let you work through the feelings you have.
You mentioned that
if we don't get these feelings out, we are more likely to develop
if
PTSD.
You lose your arrogance, you
if
lose
we
your ego
don't share, we are putting up barriers to communication, which leads to problems in our relationships.
Good, bad, or otherwise, is to develop a relationship with them. Is build that relationship with them.
We've got to talk about
like you said with yourself, with your first wife.
That's one of the things.
For all intent and purposes, for 7-8 years,
law enforcement. We just
how was a relationship built?
Some of the bigger cities, they have
we'd been together for
practice.
10.
Sure,
and so they go share stuff.
Had a great relationship
with people that actually get it. And that's part of the problem is we have this us versus them mentality as we go out into our communities. They don't get what we do, and it's true. They don't get what we do.
You don't have
things they don't want to see or hear.
You can't help her. You can't see what she's going through.
That doesn't mean
you're going through.
It's us versus them. It just means that they have a different experience.
You're not communicating. You're not.
And you just said that's something that we don't think about. And
the day that I handed her,
there's several portions to that. You mentioned that's what builds relationships. We talked about that a little bit ago. If you lose your arrogance, you lose your ego and all that stuff like that.
Why not?
You're then
cancer.
The way to have an influence on somebody else, good, bad, or otherwise, is to develop a relationship with them, is build that relationship with them. Like you said with yourself, with your first wife, you didn't see her
I have cancer
for all intent and purposes for 7-8 years or something.
Yeah.
How was a relationship built if you don't spend time with somebody?
That's how bad our communication. We'd been together for 10.
Yeah.
And we had a great relationship. And then, then I became a cop. And then she got into depression, and the two weren't related.
You want to have them involved in what's going on, and
depression
when that doesn't happen.
But
it's
that's just the thing is you don't have you can't develop a relationship. You can't help her. You can't see what she's going through. She can't see what you're going through, because you're not working with each other because you're not communicating. You're not.
That's what they think about.
Here's how bad it got. The day that I handed her the papers for divorce. She looked at me. We're standing out in the front yard of my old house. And she looked at me and says, "You can't leave me." And I said, "Why not?" She goes, "I have cancer.
I've got to be careful."
And I kind of looked at her, and she used health as an excuse for years. And I looked at her and said, no, you don't.
Natural process, unfortunately.
I said, you are using health as an excuse. And she said, no, I have cancer. And she brought me paperwork about 4 days later, and she had cancer.
When you don't see yourself,
she never told me.
So
that's how bad our communication.
It's weird that you can go from that story you told with that last case
both ways,
and both ways. We can still build it into
how we develop. Tell your husband that
other things in our lives.
Yeah, there's you want to have them involved in what's going on, and when that doesn't happen, that's so it's hard or it's frustrating and scary.
Like you said, people think
what else is being hidden from me? What else are we not talking about?
And that's funny because that's what when we don't talk to our spouses,
but that's not the case.
That's what they think about us. What else are we hiding?
Right.
What else is going on?
And we see some bad stuff.
Human nature.
I think there's a part where we don't want to read.
In some ways, but it's also a survival.
Yeah, it hurts us
process.
To go back
there. If I can't trust things,
and then
I've got to be careful, and I keep those things that hurt me away.
Right.
And,
right.
That's
I actually
had a process.
One of my first classes I taught at
in a relationship.
I had 3 people. 4 people from his city.
That's just it's scary or it's frustrating when you don't see yourself in that position, and so
2 of his partners.
It's weird that you can go from that story you told with that last case you had, and then we can still build it into how we develop.
So I looked at
other things in our lives. How some things they have multiple applications in our lives, whether it's how to talk to people, how to deal with people, and like you said, people think that cops are all
that's 60%.
People who got bullied in school or something.
No, they don't. Need to know
but that's not the case. The deal is we're human,
we're creatures of habit,
and we see some bad stuff, and I think there's a part where we don't want to rehash it. We don't want to go back there.
And
it hurts us to go back there.
80% of his life.
And then look what it did to us. What's it going to do to somebody that doesn't get it?
Wives Auxiliary.
Right.
And so I actually had one of my first classes I taught. I had a guy in there. I had 3 people. 4 people from his city, him, his sergeant, and 2 of his, they were detectives, 2 of his partners.
Yeah, he was with work.
He just was sitting there with his arms folded, and I looked at him, and he made a comment, I don't tell anything to my family about work.
On him physically.
So I looked at him, and I said,
sure.
And he immediately reminded me of me 20 years before.
Get in trouble
and I looked at him and said, you don't talk to your family about
outside
60% of your waking
alcohol.
That's 60% if you're not
a relationship.
Right.
If they feel they're lacking
and he
something,
says, no,
and I'll be honest,
I
did that with I had an affair with my second wife.
We're creatures of habit.
Because I had
sharing
a relationship with my first wife at that time.
With them 60% of your life. What else are you sharing?
Do that again. That was another time. That was the time.
And I guarantee he's not sharing 70-80% of his life. And I guarantee his wife. And I actually spoke with the FOP Wives Auxiliary.
Wrong.
And presented
I don't like the word wrong,
looked at my class and talked to them. And they said, if he's not talking, I know something's wrong. And it makes me wonder.
So I have a wonderful wife now.
Said, I wonder if she's cheating on me.
I have no secrets. If I were to go cheat on
her, he was with work.
In the door.
Right. She wouldn't have to smell perfume or see lipstick on her collar or anything like that.
Then let's go back and experience how many of them are cheating on him physically too.
Yeah, because there's that thing.
And that's one way
that
officers get in trouble is
marriage as well.
They turn to things that are outside
level where
whether it be alcohol,
you don't have to,
or whether it be a relationship. If they feel they're lacking something, and I'll be honest, I did that with my.
Unless I want
an affair with my second wife,
I don't have to explain myself.
I had no relationship.
The reason I'm
doing
it is because, oh my gosh,
and I will never ever do that again. That was another time.
The other side of it is,
I quit.
I can do what it is that I'm doing, and then
I was totally
she can ask, what are we doing here? Oh, this. Oh, okay, cool.
Wrong.
Or I've done something. And how was your day? It was fine.
But I was.
Oh, I see that you did this thing. Oh yeah,
since then,
I did.
No way in hell.
The reason I did it was because there's no other thing.
She knows everything.
There's no secrets. If I were to defend yourself on it or anything like that.
In the door.
Right. Nice. You wouldn't have to smell perfume or see lipstick on your collar or anything like that. She would see it on your face long before.
Was that way?
Yeah.
Because there's that thing.
I had to. There was a lot of defending.
I had it.
I'm
on my second marriage as well. but
making sure they know that I'm doing the right thing, and
that
you
level
don't have to worry about
me.
That
you don't have to. I don't have to try to explain.
There's not that. And when you have a good relationship,
a course of action that I'm doing, it's
that ability.
I mean, unless I want to detail it out, I don't have to explain myself. Well, the reason I'm doing it is because, oh my gosh, you don't have that going on. The other side of it is,
she says,
I can do what it is that I'm doing,
and I'm thinking,
and then and she can ask, what are we doing here? Oh, this. Oh, okay, cool. Or I've done something, and how was your day? It was fine.
Just let me be.
Oh, I see that you did this thing.
So I left.
Oh, yeah, I did.
I have,
and I have
to my second wife,
well, the reason I did it was because there's no other thing there.
Excuses.
There's no have to defend yourself on it or anything like that. It's a nice feeling, and I'll tell you, my first marriage was that way, or I guess not that way. I had to. There was a lot of defending. There was a lot of explaining. There was a lot of
she says,
making sure they know that I'm doing the right thing, and you don't have to worry about me.
I just need some time alone.
There's not that. And
so that I can
when you have a good relationship, you have that. You have that ability to be yourself and who you are.
Because here's what that that's my wife now. We talk anxiety, fear all the time about everything. Those kind of things that I got really upset when she says, okay. And so I just need to be alone. Now she'll say, "Hey, I could use some time alone. Why don't you go golf or go shoot?"
What did I do?
And I look at her and go, "All right, I'll see you in a while."
I kind of give some ammo.
Adamant and almost angry. Just let me.
I was listening to Betsy Brantner Smith,
and I have with my second wife. I left a lot of times,
and you know who she is. You're familiar with her. And if anybody listening is not familiar with Betsy Brantner,
and that history,
she is the wife of Dave Smith, and Dave Smith is otherwise known as
left. And when I got back, she says,
if you don't know who that is, Google it.
I'm not mad at you.
It is some of the best early 90s, late 80s video. I think it's in the 80s.
I recharge when I'm alone. And when I am burned out, I just need some time alone.
Of how not to be a cop.
So that I can recharge.
But doing it in imperative form.
We talked
about
it. I said, okay, if you can just, rather than just tell me to leave, because here's what that brings up in me. It brings up anxiety,
but he does
fear
it all
that you're going to leave.
Those
kind of things that I
so it's a learning tool on how to do it.
And she goes, okay. And so from then on, now she'll say, hey, I can use some time alone. Why don't you go golf or go shoot? And I look at her and go, all right, I'll see you in a while.
I got to use some ammo, I guess.
Chicago area.
I was listening to Betsy Brantner Smith
talk. And one of the things she was talking about was,
and you know who she is. You're familiar with her. If anybody listening is not familiar with Betsy Brantner Smith,
and we're totally
she
different.
is the wife of Dave Smith. And Dave Smith is otherwise known as J.D.
And so that's why women have a hard time
sleeping. If you don't know who that is, Google it. It is some of the best.
My wife does that all the
early
time.
90s, late 80s video. I think it's in the 80s, I'm sure.
Yeah, 80s.
I said, we'll just stop thinking about whatever.
Video of
women,
how not to be a cop, basically, but doing it in imperative form. This guy thinks he knows everything, and he's the epitome of all that is policeman.
This is football. This is cars.
But he does it all wrong, and he does not see that. And so it's a learning tool on how to do it, and
sometimes we go
tongue in cheek and they're hilarious. But Betsy was
when a woman asks
his wife,
"What are you thinking about?"
She was a sergeant, a police officer in Chicago area.
And they don't believe
and she, I recently heard her talk. One of the things she was talking about was
that's the joke.
Differences between the man brain and the woman brain.
It is,
and we're totally different. And women have this idea. They have these things that just need to be always dealt with. And so that's why women have a hard time sleeping at night. Their brain does not shut off. And
done on
I can attest. My wife does that all the time.
And
she's
like,
I didn't sleep a wink last night. She's I'm so tired.
Neural pathways are working.
And I said, we'll just stop thinking about whatever. She's like, I can't.
We are absolutely
so women,
some
of them just they can't shut their brain off. Guys, we compartmentalize our brains, and we're thinking, okay, this is guns, this is golf, this is football, this is cars, this is work, this is we look at this, and then we have a compartment where it's completely empty. And sometimes we go into that compartment. We're in there. And so when a woman asks a guy, what are you thinking about? Because they're just looking at them stare off into space or whatever. And the guy turns around and says, nothing.
That's like with my
and
wife.
They don't believe us.
She'll start
like,
telling
you
me about
lying sack of crap. You are thinking about something. Go? Is it another woman or whatever?
Can I fix it?
Right.
How can I fix it?
Yeah.
And so
the idea is no, that's not. It is kids. I honestly am thinking about nothing. I am.
Look at me and
I've gone to nowhere land because I can shut off and go there. And there's been scientific studies done on man brain, woman brain,
because
and it's that way that there's just the neural pathways are working
and
a
the
little bit different.
Is we sit there and think about
and so we are absolutely different.
I can bring something
and
up
the fact that if you can communicate, I need this because this is where I'm at.
And then
we understand.
She's not necessarily
the same thing.
If
I say I'm doing this, they understand. So we know which path to take.
A couple
because
days
we're
later,
different.
she might
say, and so we have to get our
about if we were to do
kind of like a sprocket where each tooth has to go into the gap.
I hadn't even thought about with that topic.
If we get aligned, we will be smooth.
Able to go outside
and things work out good. The only way we can do that is if we communicate and we work with each other and talk.
Wall straight forward, and she's like, "Well, what about?"
That's like with my wife. She'll start telling me about a problem around the house, and where does my mind immediately go?
Oh, in order to do that, we have to go buy some more ammunition.
How can I
in order
fix
to do
it?
that, we need to.
So
we
when
need to take the boat out to the lake in order to do that.
Look at me, and I'll look at her for a moment and say, first off, before we get any further, is this something you want me to fix or just listen to?
Yeah.
And then she'll tell me, just listen to it.
Yeah, continually tell me.
Because otherwise my mind's going, okay, here's how I can do this.
You're going through all these things where you're trying to figure out and navigate life.
As we sit there and think about things, if I can bring something up to her.
You had an affair with your second wife while you were married to your first.
And then
she's
not necessarily let's fix this.
So how did that?
That's not necessarily how she thinks. She takes it in
because
a couple days later she might say, "What do you think about if we were to do that?"
And
what I
it's a direction I hadn't even thought about with that topic.
Yeah, I mean,
but she had been able to go outside the box and think of things in a different direction. And I'm trying to figure out how to bust through this wall straight forward. And she's like, "Well, what about?" That's really good. And so not only that, it may be something cool like, in order to do that, we have to go buy some more ammunition, or in order to do that, we need to make sure we take the boat out to the lake in order to do that, or whatever the case is. And a lot of times it works out to be in a favorable position.
So that's kind of where that
you are a keeper, and I gotta continually
relationship with the second marriage, how did it affect that?
But so you're going through all these things where you're trying to figure out, navigate life with marriages and stuff, and you said that you had an affair with your second wife while you were married to your first.
I'll be honest, that's just not me, and why I did the first time.
And so how did that affect you in the long run? Because obviously, that
my
didn't
second
last.
wife was actually wanted to kind of approach me. I was working.
What I
one night,
found out was,
and I was not going to get off.
I mean, I had already
about 10 o'clock.
Told my wife that I wanted a divorce.
And I had
actually, you know what? No, it was shortly before. I started that before that, and I'm sure that created distance in my first marriage too, because I just didn't want anything to do with her anymore.
Right.
Jeez.
And I kind of looked at her
as we're going through. Then the second wife said,
"I get off at 1 o'clock, and I'm thinking,
I'm divorced.
1 o'clock, she's going to be home in bed with her husband.
I'm not going to wait forever.
Right.
She's not coming over, and so
we'll take care of this."
I walk out.
So that's kind of where that one went. As far as
wow.
Relationship of the second marriage, how did it affect that?
And that's kind of where things started.
It really didn't for me. I never
I found out
cheated on her. I never went out on my second wife. And I'll be honest, that's just not me. And why I did the first time, I don't know.
Didn't have any
issues. I haven't figured that out.
I wish I would have.
Well, my second wife was actually one who kind of approached me. I was working security one night.
I had, she
and I was not going to get off work until 1. She showed up about 10 o'clock where I was working security at a recreation center. And she goes, "No," when she passed. And I had to leave swear words out of my book because the publisher had swear words.
But then as we were going through the divorce
she says, "Well, I've been flirting my ass off with you for months. Are you going to fuck me or not?"
Was the ending.
Jeez.
Trauma doesn't just happen at work.
And I kind of looked at her and I went,
"Trauma doesn't just happen at work."
I get off at 1 o'clock and I'm thinking
Christmas
1 o'clock,
Eve,
she's going to be home in bed with her husband.
Right.
She's not coming over. And so, okay.
We were sitting downstairs.
I'd walk out of work at 1:15 and there she was waiting for me.
Wow.
And it was like,
families
I did not expect that. And that's kind of where things started.
Number one, they were poor. Number two, they did not have good family
but I found out that, later, I'm not the only one she's that way with.
So my son said, "Hey, can they
And during our marriage, I actually didn't have any trust issues. I wish I would have.
Heard one of my stepdaughters
because I was
OCD, and she got upset,
turning a new leaf, doing things the way I had. It wasn't she was a heck of a stepmom for my son, and I did not want to be divorced again because I didn't want to have a son. He'd already lost his mom when she passed.
She's a good kid. Kid.
And, but then as we were going through the divorce later,
so she got upset.
Well,
my wife
in fact,
got mad, and
what really was the ending. Trauma doesn't just happen.
My wife came upstairs.
Sure. Trauma doesn't just happen at work.
Bedroom and
Christmas Eve, and I can't remember which year now.
Dresser by her bed and pulls out her gun.
We were sitting downstairs with the kids and watching, and my son had a couple of his friends over that came from
6 hour with a commemorative stuff on it because I bought it for her.
Families that were not.
And she puts it up her head and she goes, I can't.
Number one, they were poor. Number two, they did not have good family relationship. Mom and dad fought all the time. And so my son said, hey, can they stay
she started
have Christmas with us?
Maybe I should kill my daughter first. She had some drug addiction problems. And
but one of my stepdaughters was a little OCD, and she got upset and created a scene.
Then she went into
because she's thinking, and it wasn't that she was angry about the decision. She was thinking, we don't have presents for them. We don't have this for them. We're not prepared.
Where's the clip to your gun? I had
she's a good kid
there, and I had to take it apart. I was going to clean it before I went back to work after Christmas.
And so she got upset. Now my wife got mad, and I could hear them in my stepdaughter's room yelling and screaming. And then my wife came upstairs, and she came into the bedroom.
She starts yelling about me. Where's
she
clip?
reaches into her dresser by her bed and pulls out her gun.
What the fuck?
And I know it's loaded.
And then something's telling me to stay sitting in that
stainless
chair.
steel Sig Sauer.
This is one of those times I
commemorative stuff on it because I bought it for her.
I walked in
and she puts it up her head. She goes, I can't believe it.
Closet.
Just kill myself. And she started going. I'm sitting in a chair in the bedroom and her thinking, oh shit,
Sig Sauer in the right hand.
Yeah.
As I walked into the closet,
and
she jammed that.
Then she started going off about, well, maybe I should kill my daughter first. She'd had some drug addiction problems, and so she was.
And I raised my hands.
She's just mad and had a shitty life, and I can't do anything with them. And then she went into the walk-in closet in the master bedroom.
Now I'm the hostage,
and all of a sudden she's yelling at me.
Yeah.
And the emotion.
Where's the clip to your gun? I had my duty weapon in there, and I had taken it apart. I was going to clean it before I went back to work after Christmas. And it was sitting there on a shelf,
and she wasn't even mad
empty.
At me. She was
the magazine was sitting next to it, as was the round that
I have my hands
was in the chamber. And she starts yelling about me. Where's the clip? Where's the clip to your gun? And I'm thinking, the weapon down. Shit, she's already got one loaded gun. Weapons. Fuck.
And what's funny is,
and then something's telling me to stay sitting in that chair. And this is one of those times I did not listen.
Plain sight, black on a white shelf.
I walked into the bedroom or to the walk-in closet, and she had my empty weapon in her left hand and her loaded Sig Sauer in the right hand. And as I walked into the closet, she jammed that Sig into my chest.
She raised that Sig. And right here next to my head, shot it into the ceiling above me.
And I raised my hands about shoulder high because I knew if I go higher, I can't do anything with them. And
we're done.
And I had been trained as a hostage negotiator. Now I'm the hostage
with my arm
and I'm negotiating like a mother.
Yeah.
And the emotions are high on everybody, and I don't know where I'm going with it. I'm trying to. I did my best to talk her down.
Into the shoes, the loaded
and
one, the empty one. I just by the clothes basket where it was at.
And she's just angry. And she wasn't even mad at me. She was mad at her daughter.
Bedroom, and then she couldn't talk.
So I have my hands raised.
I broke her jaw in 3 places.
Talking and trying to talk her into just putting the weapon down. And I said, you don't need 2 weapons. And what's funny is if she reached her right hand over within arm's reach was where the magazine that she was demanding was, right there in plain sight, black on a white shelf.
I hit my wife.
But she was so angry she didn't see it.
I'll be honest, that's something, I was raised, you don't touch a girl ever.
And then, after a few minutes, and I'll be honest, I don't know how long, it seemed like an hour.
It probably took me.
But I have no idea, but then she raised that Sig and right here next to my head
to get over that.
Shot it into the ceiling above me.
I don't know, 6 or 8
months. And I'm thinking, okay,
that. And even the
we're done.
Said
and as she lowered the gun back to my chest, I followed the arm down with my arm and I hit her in the jaw
and I
knocked her out.
People for that. And here I did.
Unfortunately, I helped. She was groggy as all get out. I took the guns. And one I tossed over into the shoes. The loaded one, the empty one I just left by the clothes basket where it was at.
Can I borrow your garage?
And I walked her into the bedroom, and then she couldn't talk because unfortunately, I broke her jaw in 3 places.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And Lieutenant called the city police.
So now I'm freaking because I'm worried I'm going to get fired. She used my weapon.
Police waiting for me.
And,
weapons drawn,
I knew
I think I'm armed.
And I hit my wife, which I'll be honest, that's something, I was raised, you don't touch a girl ever.
Assault.
And after it probably took me,
I actually have
several months
relationship.
Of counseling to get over that.
Over the years that
I don't know, 6 or 8 months just to get over that. And even the counselor said it was self-defense. And I knew it was self-defense, but you just don't touch your wife.
Sure.
It was kind of an interesting
anyway, and I've
thing,
arrested people for that. And here I did it.
I did not want to get divorced that bad.
Anyway, so we got her to the hospital, and I called a buddy of mine and said, dude, I've got to get out of here.
But we ended up
I need a place to store my Harley. Can I borrow your garage? And then I told him what happened. I said, don't tell anybody. Let's just get this dealt with. And the first thing he did was call my lieutenant.
She runs her own company.
And the lieutenant then called the city police where we lived.
Yeah.
And I showed up from the hospital the next day, and there's police waiting for me, weapons drawn, because they think I'm armed.
I'm not
right.
One of those witnesses.
And we went from there. She ended up getting charged with a second-degree felony aggravated assault.
I was hoping it would save my marriage, but it did not.
Believe it or not, I actually have been in an abusive relationship. That's just there was a whole bunch of other stuff that happened over the years that I should have left years before.
But it was another learning experience, and every one of the
now
things,
I can relate to abused spouses,
or whether it be at work, the traumatic things, how we deal with them.
It was kind of an interesting thing because I actually wanted to stay. I did not want to get divorced that bad.
Things then led to me living
and I worked through court with her, and took about 2 years, but we ended up getting it pled down to a misdemeanor.
When I got up there, I didn't go anywhere.
I'm not sure if that's good or bad.
15 miles from the nearest town.
But it could have really ruined her company. She runs her own company.
Right.
And they did a lot of work with the government. If you've got a felony conviction, that work's gone.
A little bit. There was only 2 drinks in
so I really worked,
but they were hard, 32 ounces each.
And I told the police department, I'm going to be one of those witnesses. I'm not going to cooperate.
I was consistent, and I did that for a few months. And then one night I woke up
and that's what I did.
What the hell?
I was hoping it would save my marriage, but it did not. I look back now and go,
grateful though for
I
my
got
second
used
wife.
pretty hard.
Yeah.
She actually introduced me.
Sounds like it.
She went through this training, and when she got out of it,
it was another learning experience. And every one of the things,
a lot of the
whether it be at home or whether it be at work, the traumatic things, how we deal with them is a learning experience.
And I actually saw the change. And I went, hey, I want that.
These things then led to me living up at my cabin for 3 years, pretty much by myself. I drove 57 miles to work every day.
Got to take this is where I really started.
When I got up there, I didn't go anywhere.
Was through this
because it was 15 miles from the nearest town.
The root of all my issues, and the root of things that I
got up to my cabin, and I actually started drinking
during that time.
It was only 2 drinks a night.
Start thinking outside the box,
but they were 32 ounces each.
We as cops, we put this little tiny box around us.
But I was consistent. And I did that for a few months. And then one night I woke up and
you know what a drum circle is?
What the hell are you doing?
When I say drum circle, what's the first thing comes to your mind?
No, I
like a village of people
things just
sitting
work.
around. Just
I do get to be grateful though for my second wife.
Something like that. And
she actually introduced me. She went to this training, and when she got out of it, she had changed. A lot of the anger she had was gone, and she was angry all the time before.
The drum circle was always,
but a lot of the anger she had was gone, and I actually saw the change. And I went, hey, I want that.
Other drugs.
So I went back into some training.
So I went to the drum circle.
And
actually,
I went through some things, and I finally got to take this is where I really started to take a hardcore look at myself. Was through this training
culture,
and what was the root of all my issues, or the root of things that I was bothered by.
And so I went to some of those, and I went, wow.
And
it's kind of cool.
During that time,
and then I went and tried,
I started to open up and start thinking outside the box a little bit.
Here's my second.
We as cops, we put this little tiny box around us. If it's outside that box, it's wrong.
I called my son to come pick me up.
I actually, believe it or not, you know what a drum circle is?
I couldn't drive.
When I say drum circle, what's the first thing comes to your mind?
Right.
And like a village of people just sitting around, just
his wife drove my
like camp, like there's a fire in the middle or something like that.
I'm sitting up there at the
guys, people just circling,
my wife
playing, hitting on something, whether it's a bongo or whether it's a djembe or whether it's a.
That's the relationship.
And here in Utah, the drum circle was always dopers and hippies.
Okay.
So there's always marijuana around, but I had other drugs, and that's what a drum circle was. So I went to a drum circle, Tibetan bowls, and actually some of them were run by people that are actually shamans in the Native American
Yeah, they actually are used for healing.
And put one on my shoulder. Shamans are the healers.
And start doing it in the tone and the vibration.
And so I went to some of those, and I took one. It's kind of cool.
One pill.
And then I went and tried, I had shoulder surgery.
And that was it.
Here's my second marriage. I had shoulder surgery. I drove myself down to a rotator cuff. And I had to call when I was done, I called my son to come pick me up. And so I started trying home because I couldn't drive and I was loopy.
And then one morning I'm sitting up at the cabin.
So my son came and picked me up, and his wife drove my truck home. And then they got home. So I'm sitting up there at the cabin by myself. My wife is working, and she was not going to come help me.
And I actually wrote for like 4 hours.
And that's the relationship.
I went back and read it later. And I had talked to a counselor, obviously, about the program that I teach now that I wanted to
but I had the shoulder surgery, and I'm going to I went to have you ever heard of Tibetan bowls or singing bowls?
Oh, yeah, where they rub their finger around the brim of it.
She looked at it and she goes,
or whatever.
They actually are used for healing, and they put one on my shoulder and started doing it in the tone and the vibration, and the pain went away. I took one
outside the box
pain med, one pill
off the charts
after a rotator cuff surgery.
The book is my
and that was it.
Wow, that's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, partially I'm afraid of pain meds. They scare me because they're addictive.
And with a few more stories, obviously.
But and so I started trying some things like that outside the box. And then one morning I was sitting up at the cabin. I woke up about 7 o'clock in the morning. I just woke up. It was my day off.
In Bridging the Gap,
and I grabbed
there's a story
pen and paper, and I started writing. And I actually wrote for like 4 hours, and I didn't know what I wrote. I went back and read it later, and I had talked to a counselor about the program that I teach now that I wanted to put together. And we had discussed it. But that's as far as it had gotten. And when I reread those notes, I went, wow. And I showed it to her, and she looked at it, and she goes, hey,
they even put extra locks on the door.
That's your program. You're 60% done. Finish it.
Well, as I pulled into the apartment complex,
and it was amazing because I opened myself up, started thinking outside the box a little bit. My creativity went off the charts for me. That's where the book came from. The book is my program.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, the book is my program.
Funny
and with a few more stories, obviously.
Anyway, so I talked to the parents. We started searching, and I went over and looked, but I couldn't even see the water. I couldn't even see the edge of the
and now that's what I do. I write books.
And
cool.
So we asked the parents, okay,
so in Bridging the Gap,
where does he like to play?
There's a story you tell about
where does he want to take you guys take him to, and
you being unable to save a child's life.
We searched the residence first.
Yeah.
What's that one?
And we searched for about 45 minutes.
I'm going to cry, but that's okay.
You're welcome.
Now we're thinking,
kids kill me
here.
Yeah. Got called on a missing child one day,
and other neighbors from in the
apartment complex. 3-year-old. His parents called him Little Houdini.
So as we're gathered up, and we
even put extra locks on the door, and he still got out. They didn't know where he was at.
Gathered, trying to figure out our next.
Well, as I pulled into the apartment complex,
came up, and
there's a fountain with a little pond there, and some teenagers night before had put soap suds in. So there was like 20 feet of soap suds piled up and overflowing out onto the roadway. And
I saw a shoe.
I'm thinking as I walked in, I went,
"Oh shit!"
Funny, but damn kids.
Right.
Anyway, so I talked to the parents. We started searching, and I went over and looked, but I couldn't even see the water. I couldn't even see the edge of the pond.
Pulled him out.
The suds was so thick. And so we asked the parents, okay, where's his favorite park? Where does he like to play? Where does he go where does he want to take you guys take him to? And, all the stuff that we did. And obviously we searched the residence first
together and went and got the
family. And we searched for about 45 minutes and we couldn't find him.
Truck up.
And, now we're thinking, oh shit, we probably got a kidnapping here. So we and other neighbors from in the apartment complex were helping out too. So as we're gathered up, and we happened to gather right by that pond, and gather trying to figure out our next plan of action. A little breeze came up, and
I was
there were kind of in a little circle on my back.
At the time,
the pond was just to my left side a little bit, and the breeze came up and it split the soap suds. And I looked down and went, oh, and I saw a shoe.
Southern accent. He's from Louisiana.
I went, oh shit! And I reached in and grabbed the kid, or one of the neighbors actually reached in and grabbed the kid and pulled him out, and then I started doing CPR on it.
Take care of yourself.
And then when you get yourself taken care of, come back. Did CPR until fire got there. Don't worry about it till you get yourself taken care of, brother. I went and found a church. Held my shit together and went and got the family with a neighbor who took him up to the hospital, followed his fire truck up. Bawled my eyes out for about an hour. And unfortunately, thinking, of course, he didn't make it. What could I have done different? What did I do? Why didn't it work?
Yeah.
All the things that go through your mind or through my mind. And anyway. I did the best I could. I know that. Those type of situations. But I went back and did my report. That's about all I could do at that point. That's one of the ones I shared. I was standing there, and I actually had a really good lieutenant at the time. Thank God, he's still a friend of mine today. Kids always hurt. And he walked up to me and says, "You okay, brother?"
You get those
southern accent.
And you can't help but either. I mean, if you have kids at all, and you went through them being that age.
One time in my life, I was honest. I said, "No, I'm not."
And I think I mentioned
and he said,
this before.
"Okay," but he says, "Go take care of yourself."
You go through that where you have.
And then
see something
when you get
horrible
yourself taken care of, come back and work on
a little kid or whatever.
Don't worry about it till you yourself.
And you have a kid, you can't help but put yourself in that position. I went and found a church parking lot. And I parked in the back corner when it's all said and done. My back, and you just want to go hold.
I sat there and bawled my eyes out for about an hour.
It's weird that we
thinking,
go through life,
of course, what could I have done different?
Always putting ourselves in other people's shoes.
Why didn't it work?
We don't.
All the things that go through your mind or through my mind.
When a major incident happens,
but our minds as we go through those type of situations.
Man, I could have had or you want to go hold your kids because that could have been them at any time.
That's one of the ones I share in my class.
And I've had a couple incidents
kids
where
always
I
hurt.
needed to just go hold my kids and just hold them. And they're now they're
you get those
adults, but they were
teenagers. And you can't
at
help
the time,
but
said,
either. I mean, if you have kids at all,
and they're like, well, what are you doing?
You went through them being that age.
I'm glad you are.
If you go as a police officer,
you are.
And I think I mentioned this before on the show, but
you
go through that where you have you see something horrible happen to somebody, a little kid or whatever.
Happen to these other people,
and you have a kid,
you want to go do it.
You can't help but put yourself in that position. You can't help but just want to go when it's all said and done.
But it might also
you just want to go hold your own kids. Know that they've
and then
it's weird that we go through life
and making sure
always putting ourselves in other people's shoes, and even though we don't think we do, we do.
In my case, I know that.
When a major incident happens, what do you want to do? You want to go,
put those kids in my life for me to help
man, I could have happened to me, or you want to go hold your kids because
who they are.
That could have been
because
them
of me,
at any time.
I don't know. Maybe they looked at my faults or my flaws and they said, "Okay."
I've had a couple incidents where I needed to just go hold my kids and just hold them, and they're
in our lives
now. They're adults, but they were teenagers at the time, and they said, I'm hugging them, and they're like, "Well, what are you doing?"
Family's life.
I'm glad you are who you are. I'm glad you are the good person that you are, and you can't help it. You do. You love your kids, and as much as you feel bad for the horrible things that happen to these other people, and if there's anything you can do, you want to go do it.
A couple of things I didn't put in the book, but
you
was a 2-year-old.
You can.
My son was 2.
And it might be a selfish thing, but it might also be a testament to who you are and what you've done in life. And then just the fact that somebody's looking over you and making sure that those that they've given to you. In my case, I know that the Lord's always working, and He put those kids in my life for me to help raise, and those kids are who they are because of me. I don't know. Maybe they looked at my faults or my flaws and they said, "Okay, I can be better than that." And that'd be cool if that's what they're doing.
Little things that chip away.
But they're in our lives for a reason, and just like we get put into people's lives,
and that's something you're going to live with. You're going to be with them for the
you
rest
get put
of your
in
life.
this family's life
and
to help find their little one or whatever
all you
the
can
case
do
is
do better.
There are no accidents,
and try to do your part.
And some things we don't. Sometimes we don't know how it's going to turn out. Part of self accountability, what I find, it always works. It always works. And I had one. I didn't. There's a couple of things I didn't put in the book, but I had one. It was a 2-year-old kid. My son was 2 at the time. That's where I started. And it was a crib death.
Right.
And that one, I went home and grabbed my son and try to hold a 2-year-old for very long.
Sure, he's like, "What are you doing? Get away!"
But that was another one that really changed a lot of my terminology. A lot.
Yeah,
I mean, bad because those are judgment words. There's just so many things. What's funny is, as officers, we look at it. That's no big deal. It wasn't a bank robbery, but then a shootout. Actually, but I got that from a guy. It's the little things that chip away.
Right. You still get scars. They still They still build up over time. And that's something you're going to live with. You're going to be with for the rest of your life.
He had felony warrants.
And
so
all you can do is do better from there. And try to do your part to instill goodness in others or whatever.
And part of self-accountability, what I finally learned was I don't get to let them define me. I define myself by that experience.
I said, what? He goes, yeah, I need to get food for my kids, and I didn't have any money.
And that's where I started looking at things as
absolutely.
There's really no good news or bad news.
The way he did it could have been
done differently.
The
good news is,
and I pointed that out to him. I said,
there's no bad news because we learned from it, and that's a good thing.
That would give him food.
So I really changed a lot of my terminology. I got rid of good and bad because those are judgment words.
You could do that if you had. You wouldn't be with me.
Because what's good for me may not be good for you.
Right.
And vice versa. What's bad for you may not be bad for me. Actually, I had kind of got that from the guy who was taking a jail experience. He committed a theft.
He had never been out of the neighborhood he grew up in. He didn't
just as it was getting good. Keep an eye out for part 2 of episode 36, where we continue our conversation with Glen Williams. And we're going to go into some more stories and some more things that helped him develop into the person that he became, and how he's helped use those things to help other people. And
he had
how he's
no idea. He couldn't really
learned to use those to teach other people and how to go through adversity and how to come out on the other side, successful and knowledgeable as to what he's got going on.
There is a level.
Keep an eye out for that. In the meantime,
the more you take care of things, the more
check out Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to my website, which is the What's a Hero podcast.
It's not money, and it's not
go to any of those and
necessarily that'll do it.
Interact
it's
with
experience.
Us. With the website, you can hear every episode we've had before, including a link in which that will take you to every podcast platform in which you might listen to the show. And in that case, you'll be able to download from there. And downloads help us out, so download away. But share this with people. Share this podcast with people and let your friends know, your family know, hey, it's pretty good. Sometimes it runs a little long, blah, blah, blah. But we have a good time with it, and we want to just develop a sense of encouragement and inspiration for people
a lot of times
who
you're in those
are going through various or similar things. Also gets you a knowledge of what police officers and firefighters and all these heroes actually go through.
I mean, I remember growing up, I grew up in this little town.
I want to thank all those folks, those firefighters, those law enforcement, police officers and veterans and teachers and nurses, all you heroes who are exactly that, heroes. Thank you for being who you are. You help us live in this country that is the best country in the world, and we wouldn't be able to do it without you. So thank you very much. We appreciate you. And for Glen Williams, I've been Ken Frownfelter. This is the What's a Hero podcast. You're clear.
But and we don't think about it. And you look at last year, this 2020 alone, everybody stayed at home. Nobody went anywhere. Vacations were canceled and school was canceled. You stayed and parents were home working, kids were home doing school, and everybody was stuck inside. And it was weird when things started opening up again. And I remember we were at work, we were talking about it was weird that we would have some kind of a Saturday market, or there'd be things going on, public things out, and people had forgotten how to react or how to act in public. And they've kind of gotten back to it now, but there was a time in the spring of this year where things are opening back up and people have forgot how to behave in public or something. It's because of lack of experience, lack of going out, and you get so cabin fever.
Yeah.
Sitting in there.
What's funny is I picked my stepson up at the Las Vegas airport during the pandemic. He had to go somewhere, and so I picked him up. And as we're driving up Las Vegas Boulevard to head home, I lived in southern Utah at the time. And as we're driving home, I told him, I says, you got to videotape this. He says, I said, you'll never see Vegas like this ever again.
Oh, where it was just, it was barren, huh?
Yeah. You remember the old Westerns where they have the empty street with the tumbleweeds blowing across and wisps of dust? That's what it was. There was nobody there.
Wow.
And I hope he videotaped it. I didn't get a copy, but I know he did because I watched it.
I've been to Las Vegas, I don't know, countless times, and I've never seen it empty like that. It's always been, thousands and thousands of cars.
We saw 3 security guards, and they were putting up barricades on a plaza.
Huh.
Or to parking. Yeah. It was weird.
That's kind of funny. So tell us about, there's another story you have in the book where you're talking about running through a door while shots were being fired.
The red door. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that one was kind of weird. I was just working 9 o'clock to 6, graveyard shift.
Mm-hmm.
And we got a call. The gal had come over to her parents' house in Sandy, the city I lived in and was working in. And her husband, who was a gangbanger, had taken a shot at her in a neighboring city earlier in the day. So she came over to mom and dad's to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
They called us. And so this is the weirdest thing. But they called us, and the sergeant and I are on the porch talking with them, trying to find out what's going on and getting the background story and what we need to do. And as we're standing there on the porch, the husband drives by, and he's going, as I turn off the porch, he's going from my right to my left, and my car's parked facing the right. So I ran out to my car, jumped in, flipped a U as fast as I could, and it took me about 3 blocks to catch up with him. But I caught up with him at a stop sign up the street. Unfortunately, now there's 2 identical cars, same color, same make.
Oh man!
And I have no idea which one is which.
Mm-hmm.
And the first car goes straight into further into the subdivision, and the second car turned right towards the exit to get out of the subdivision. So I went after the second car. I'm thinking, this guy, no way he's going to stay around.
Right.
And I called for backup, and we felony stopped and pulled the driver out at gunpoint, and it was the wrong car.
Oh man.
It was the wrong car. So I got assigned that night to sit outside that house, and we talked to them, and I wanted to sit inside the house to protect the daughter. But these guys are also kind of hardcore gangbangers, and they didn't want me in their house. Nope, my sons will take care of it. All right. So I'm sitting outside the house, and I sat there from about 10 o'clock until about 4 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And I had no relief. I had no lunch. I had nothing. But I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting in front of the house, and the house had a 2-car garage on the right-hand side. It was a split entry. You walk into a living room, and then you go up, turn right, you go up some stairs to the bedrooms and down the stairs to other bedrooms or a family room or something. I don't know. I never got to the basement part of it or the lower part of it. Anyway, I'm sitting out front, and all I can see is the front of the house. And I'm thinking, this is absolutely a worthless place to sit.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see anything. So I backed up to the neighbor's house, and I'm parked facing the wrong way on traffic now because I want to be facing the house. And I backed up to the neighbor's house, and then I actually parked across the street so I could actually see the front and one side of the house. That's all I could see. And there was a fence, so I couldn't see the backyard. Anyway, I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden about 3:45, 4 o'clock in the morning, this little kid comes running out the door. He's shooting everybody. He's shooting everybody. And I went, oh shit. So I went, yelling on my radio on the way in, shots fired at the domestic house. They all knew where I was at.
Right.
And I went running in through the door, weapon drawn, ready to take the guy on. And as I came through the door, I'm in the living room, and mom and dad are over to the left, and it's a small living room. I mean, it might be 10 by 12, maybe.
Right.
And there's 3 guys fighting in the middle of the room, and I don't know who's who. So I holster my weapon real quick, and I just piled into the middle, and the one that the other 2 were fighting with, I figured he's the bad guy.
Right. Yeah.
And so I grabbed him and slammed him down and got the handcuffs put on him. And I look up, and they're and the one brother kept trying to kick him, and I kept having to fight him off because now he's in handcuffs. He's my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got him in there. And I finally said, hey, let me go check on your sister. And and I got up to walk up and he kicked him again. And I got back and I said, I can't check on your sister till I know this guy's safe. And I pointed at the one brother and I said, you're in charge. And if you let anybody touch him, I'm taking you to jail too. Because now it's assault.
Right. Yeah.
And he stood in between and put his hands up and pushed his brother back. And, so I went, okay. And I went up the stairs. And this guy, oh man, in the meantime, I forgot this part. I was scanning all over the place because I couldn't find the gun. I knew there was a gun and I couldn't find it at all. Uh-huh. And I did not want to leave it with a bunch of hardcore gangbangers and turn my back on them either. And so I'm scanning all over and I can't find that thing. So anyway, I finally get that part settled. And I went up the stairs and her bedroom was first one on the right. She'd been laying in bed with her 2-year-old son in her arms. Mm-hmm. Now, a little backstory. This guy had parked 3 blocks away and snuck through backyards to get to the house. He climbed in a back window and then snuck up the stairs into her bedroom where she was sleeping with their son in her arms. Uh-huh. He was using a .22 caliber, so that's why I couldn't hear shots being fired. Mm-hmm. I had my window down. I had my radio off. I had nothing to interfere with hearing. And he shot her right in the forehead. Jeez. Just above to the left side of her nose on the forehead. And as I looked at her, the blood was trickling down her nose onto her cheek and was just laying there. She looked peaceful. I couldn't find a pulse. I checked and I called fire. And then I went back downstairs to wait. And as I waited, the troops showed up pretty quick, real quick, 3 to 5 minutes.
Right.
But and once the troops got there, they took me outside and let me be and take a few breaths, and Sergeant talked to me and all that normal stuff.
Right.
Fire got in there and she was dead. And the crime scene got in there. They finally found the gun. It had been kicked over and they had some floor length drapes in the living room. It was under those drapes, which I'm grateful that nobody else saw it either. Interesting thing. The old man, well, go about a little bit later. Yeah, the old man, I ran into him about 6 months later. I got a call of a traffic issue. Mm-hmm. And in our city, there's a road that runs right in front of City Hall and it goes under the freeway. And as you go under the freeway, there's a hard left onto a little dirt road. And the dirt road then curves sharply to the right. Well, they put Jersey barricades around that right-hand turn because so many people had gone off that curve.
Oh, okay.
And as I got over there's a white Jeep CJ5 sitting on top of the Jersey barricades, not one wheel touching the ground.
Wow.
Perfectly balanced. And I got out, opened the door, I got out, I'm looking there going, what the, I'd never seen anything like that before.
Right.
And as I'm standing there, the old man, her dad, walked around the front. And as soon as he saw me, he started yelling and screaming at me and yelling, you're the one that killed my daughter. And, I didn't say a number of things that came to my mind, like if you'd let me in the house, she'd be alive today, you asshole. But I didn't say it. I just kept my mouth shut. And then I got looking where I was at, and I was a half block outside my city. So I called the neighboring city and have them come do the DUI because he was drunker than a skunk.
Sure.
And so I know he blames me, but I'm not the one that I am the one that had to park outside where I couldn't see anything or do anything.
Right. You can be there. You can be in there. You can. Right.
Yeah. If I would have been sitting outside her bedroom door like I wanted, I probably would have got shot. But
right. Well, there's a whole bunch of woulda, coulda, shouldas. If if one thing had happened, this wouldn't have happened. That, and we don't know. Like I said, we're human, completely fallible, but we try to do our best. Our intent is to do the best
we can.
You know?
It doesn't always work.
Right. With you, let's take doctors. They have that thing where they say, do no harm. So their intent is to do no harm.
Yeah.
Right. A police officer, his intent is to do good, to help out, to do what's right. Do we know the best way to do it all the time? No, but we have tactics, we have techniques, we have different things. We try to think outside the box, and because everybody's different. And as much as we can, and as much as we try, there's only so many things that we can do. Yeah. We're limited either by law or by, other people making a decision to say, no, we're going to do this, or no, I don't want you in my house, or, or whatever the case is. And there's a frustrating side to things. And there's only had I only been able to do this, had I only been able to do that, had this happened, or, I should have done this, and you kick yourself. And I think we're harder on ourselves than most other people are on us.
Oh, absolutely. And think about this. This has really been coming to my mind a lot of the last couple of years. We have people that are traumatized, going out to serve people that are in trauma.
Right. Yeah.
And how are the thought processes compromised because of the trauma experienced by those that are trying to serve?
Sure. Yeah.
And, we all go off and learn off past experience. And, that's one reason I really am for peer support groups and teams, and getting these so we can deal with and minimize the trauma. Because if we minimize it, I think we'll make better decisions.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's that adage of empty your cup before you try to, empty somebody else's. Or if you're gonna try to take some of the brunt off somebody, or some of the struggle somebody's going through, you take that off, and you're going to take their issues. You're going to put those issues somewhere. If your cup is full, you have nowhere to put their issues.
Exactly.
You're dealing with your own problems, and so you have to work on yourself. We have to be able to talk. We have to be able to open things up. And I talked about this on a couple of podcasts ago with Michael Segru, and he was talking about the whole thing is, yes, peer, or not peer, but debriefs are good. There's a goodness to them. However, they're not 100%, because sometimes people don't want to explain anything. They don't want to get it out there. And we talked about it a little bit ago with, our ego gets in the way, and we don't want to talk, and we don't want to bring up an issue and that sort of thing. But if we're going to be going out and helping people do things for other people, we have to take an honest look at ourselves and be able to empty that out, or change something that we're doing so we can actually be useful instead of
absolutely
just be there.
Think of it this way: when you learn to run code, what did they tell you?
Breathing. Your breathing is number one.
Breathing, but they told you you have to get there safely.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because if you don't get there, you can't help anybody else. In fact, if you don't get there, you're in an accident. You're drawing resources away.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in going. If we don't get there safely, if we're so traumatized, we're not functioning properly.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't realize when they're not functioning properly if they're not dealing with it.
Right.
Then how are we going to help those other people that need our help?
Right. I mean, it's like trying to go to a domestic and talk to a couple about how to, there might not be anything criminal. You were able to squash it before it turned criminal. It was just verbal before. And then all of a sudden you're there, you're trying to be marriage counselor. But if you have a marriage of your own that's on the rocks, who are you to be helping these folks out?
I talk about that actually in my book a little bit, my second marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the top 3 officers statistics for 3 years. I was on the firearms team. I was on the a specialized team that went out and targeted criminal areas.
Right.
And those were the things that we did. Well, I'm going through my second divorce, and I was so stressing on saving my marriage that I started making mistakes at work. And I ended up getting put on probation for a year, removed from both teams because of a couple of decisions I made. Nothing dangerous, nothing that was going to hurt anybody, but
right.
They were really not good decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even realize, how preoccupied I was. So same thing with trauma or with a marriage. If you're having problems at home, really take a careful look at how things are going, because what happens at our home, and I talk about communities a lot, we belong to a whole bunch of communities in our life.
Right.
And I asked this in my class, let's name those communities. And so we have family, work, religion, sports, school, hobbies, whatever it may be.
Right.
The city that we live in, the neighborhood that we live in, those things, and which community is most important to us. And 99% say family.
Right.
Well, if that's the case, and I'll tell people in class, that's not true. You're lying to me. And they'll look at me and why? And I said, well, if that's the case, why is the divorce rate and the suicide rate so high in law enforcement? If the most important thing is our family,
right?
Why are those two so high?
Right.
And that's when we get talking about, and that's one of the things about my course is I really want to help the problems that we have in that primary family community. Because the funny thing is that ripples out. If we have a good family life, that ripples out to our neighbors, that ripples out to our friends, that ripples out around us. And that's where we get to start making the difference. We have to start with ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you don't have any, like we said before, you don't have things to worry about. You don't have things to stress about. So if you don't have stress there, okay, that's good. And that's in good shape. I can move on to something else and I can start working on that thing.
Yeah. We're guys. I can take that other box.
Right.
And worry about that other box. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then there was one more that I wanted to talk about. And there was you having to shoot at a car that was coming at you, coming to run you down.
Yeah.
What's that one about?
Oh man. Yeah, that one, that still bothers me to this day, but because nothing turned out the way I thought it would. We'd been having a lot of burglaries up in an area in our city, and our city has the east side, which is the hills and the nicer area. And there's some of the areas where there's a lot of mini mansions, and we're talking 5,000 to 10,000 square foot places. And, back in those days worth $1 million. Now they're probably worth 2 or 3.
Wow. Yeah.
But one night at 2 a.m, an officer called out on a suspicious vehicle up in that area. And I went up to back him. And so the road he was on was paved. It was narrow. It had just enough room for 2 cars, one going each way to get by. On the east side of the road was a hillside going up, and on the west side of the road was a hillside going down to the road below it. So it's about a 10-foot drop off that side.
Okay.
Because it was right on the mountainside. Uh-huh. Anyway, as I pull up, lights out, I don't want to light him up. I park about a car length and a half, 2 car lengths behind him, and I'm walking up. Now, this is February in Utah, February or March. I can't remember which, but either way, it was cold. I mean, my breath was showing in the air.
Sure.
He was sitting there. Both cars were sitting there running, heaters on. Mm-hmm. It was probably 33, 34 degrees maybe. And so I walked up, and he rolls his window down. He was in a canine truck, and he had his dog in the back, and he's about 3 car lengths from a car in front of him. 2 or 3 car lengths. And he's got his lights and his spotlights on that car. And I can see 2 people in the car, female driver, male passenger. And as I walked up to him and I'm finding out what's going on, he tells me, I pulled up, the house is dark. And I look at the house, there's no lights in or out. It's dark. And this guy was walking down the driveway away from the house with a bag in his hands.
That's what we call a clue.
Yeah. And he picked up on it pretty quick. Yeah. What threw him was they were in a BMW. So he wasn't sure if they belonged or not.
Okay.
Yeah. By the way, the BMW turned out to be stolen. So, nice. But we didn't know that yet. Anyway, so I'm standing there next to his driver's door, and he's sort of half off the road. Like I say, there's not much room to pull off that road because of the mountainside.
Right.
And all of a sudden I hear a scratch of tires in some gravel, and that BMW's coming forward on us. and I got nowhere to go. I'd been an officer for 18 years at that time. I'd been teaching firearms for 16 of those years. And all of a sudden, I don't even remember drawing, but I'm back. I'm trying to backpedal as best as I can. Unknown road, pitch dark, and I'm just feeling my way,
right?
Because I don't want to fall. But all of a sudden, I don't even remember drawing. I'm just looking over the sights of I was carrying a Sig Sauer P220, which is a 45 caliber at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking over the sights of the driver's forehead. I'm so focused. I can see the pores of skin on her forehead over the steering wheel. And I know where that bullet's going. Right. And I start squeezing the trigger, and I keep squeezing that damn trigger, and nothing happens. And my mind is screaming at me, what the fuck is wrong? What is wrong with my gun? What am I doing wrong? What's going on? Yeah. Why isn't it going bang? I mean, that's just screaming at me. And I took 2 or 3 steps back, and I was almost to the back of the truck and still no bang, when the car was on me. And I got lucky that night. It stopped. I know there's a God.
Yeah.
It stopped. And as I bent my knee forward about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches, I was touching the bumper.
Oh, geez.
I look back on it now. By the way, it took me, of course, I'm worried about why couldn't I make my gun go off? I mean, I was squeezing for everything I was worth. Mm-hmm. And it took me 3 years. Well, I'll come back to that. The passenger, or the driver, female, 21, 22 years old, no criminal history whatsoever. The passenger, male, 26 years old, had been in prison for 5 years for, guess what? Burglary. And he was out of prison, and they had burglarized the home. As I told you, the BMW turned out to be stolen.
Right.
But if you're going to go rob a high-end neighborhood, what better way to blend in?
Right.
Anyway, as we were at the interview at the station after we took them into custody, she looked at me and she says, "Why did you point that cannon at me?" And that Sig Sauer's 45 caliber must have looked about that big to her.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I know that car looked about that big to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I look at it now, and I know there's a God, and he protected us all that night. Because if he had been driving, and he even said this, "I shouldn't have let her drive. I would have got away and you'd be dead." He would have not stopped.
Right.
The officer happened to pick that time to patrol that street, because he could have been anywhere in his area. Our areas were quite large then. Mm-hmm. We had a city of 110,000 people, and on graveyard shift, there were 5 of us. Four of us each had a specific area, 1/4 of the city, and the other roved where needed.
Right.
And then the sergeant too. But so there was a lot of space.
Sure. Yeah.
And, I look at it. Why did that happen? And I can only think of 2 reasons. Number one, maybe I would not have dealt with taking somebody's life like I think I would have. And I really don't think that's the case. I mean, I'd been to Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's classes and all the mental combat classes, and I was prepared. So I don't think that was the case. But I think maybe here's this young girl. She's hanging with hoodlums. That how she ended up with this guy, I have no idea. But good girls always like the bad guys.
Right.
And maybe, for all intents and purposes, she's going to have a kid. He's going to grow up to be president someday or something. Who knows? Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah, we won't go there. But yeah, for some reason, it worked out that way. I have still to this day don't have a clue. But I know there are no accidents. Everything happens for a reason.
Right.
I actually 3 years later, while I read a lot of firearms magazines and things, I came across an article talking about stress and shooting. Mm-hmm. And I discovered that if you have a big enough adrenaline rush, this is what the article was telling me, if you have a big enough adrenaline rush, you will squeeze so hard with your hands on the weapon, and your fine motor skills are deteriorating, that you cannot fully squeeze the trigger.
Really?
And I think that's what happened that night. I don't remember now. Yeah, but that was back in, that'd be about 2008. So I found that article was actually after I left that department. So about 2011 sometime was that was written.
That's weird. I have and I know there's a lot of officers that have recurring dreams, and the one that always seems to always kick back in. But I have one, and a lot of them have the shooting or the gun dream. I knew a guy that he said his recurring dream was he would pull the trigger and his bullet would just fall out the end of his gun. You tell that to some people, like, oh, I know what his problem is. He's suffering from something else, whatever. Mine is being there. And I've had this, I don't know how many times, where you pull the trigger and the trigger is just the heaviest thing that you can ever pull. And I cannot get that trigger back. And we use Glocks. And so Glock, the safety is on the trigger. So that's not because the safety's on or anything like that. You're pulling both of those. You feel that little flange move, and then you get to the trigger. And so that's how the Glock works. But in my dreams, I just cannot pull that trigger with anything I've got. And I have to use both fingers and both hands, and I'm just pulling with both. And it's just a pain in the butt to try to do this. And having that recurring dream, I had that for years and years, and I got into a shooting, and that dream went away until just recently it has come back. Ooh. which is super weird for me. And if there's any doctors or psychologists listening to this, maybe I've got something else going on, but you can maybe, I would welcome any kind of chime in to say, oh, you're messed up this way, or whatever the case is. I don't know, but
I'll tell you, that Sig Sauer, they have the real heavy first trigger pull, double action. Uh-huh. And I think that contributed. And it wasn't too long after that the department switched over to the Glocks with a nice consistent trigger pull.
Right.
So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but yeah. And then, as far as your dream, we'll discuss that one in private.
So you go through all these things. You have that hard marriages, you have these hard cases that you get, and you have all these things. And then you said you met your current wife.
Yeah.
And she's a rock now for you, right?
Oh, absolutely. What's funny is, I got to change, and I changed the way I was. And if I hadn't changed, we wouldn't be together. We would have gone on a couple times. He's a nice guy, but, guess what? I would have deserved that, the old me. Uh-huh. But we were able to talk. And in fact, what's funny is I actually met her online, and we talked on the phone. And we talked on the phone for probably 3 weeks before we met in person.
Okay.
But we talked every night. And like one night I had to get up at 3:30 to go to work, because I had that 57-mile drive.
Yeah.
And I had to be to work by 6. And then I had to go take my personal car halfway, because that's as far as they'd let me bring my work car.
Okay.
And so I drive, switch cars, and then head to work. And one night she says, don't you have to go to work tomorrow? I said, yeah. Don't you have to get up at 3:30? Yeah. Don't you think you should get some sleep? And I looked down, and it was 1:00, and I didn't even know it. We'd been talking since 8.
Oh, wow.
So that's how we started a relationship. And we did that every night, talked every night.
Pretty cool.
Midway through, before I met her, I had a family reunion in Colorado I went to for 3 days. Mm-hmm. And my wife's name is Debbie. And I'd be talking to her on the phone at the family reunion. And when any of my kids or my brothers and sisters, they really gave me a bad time, would look at me, and I was on the phone. Are you talking to Debbie again? I'd look up, yeah, I am. And they all kind of laugh. But what the funniest thing is, my sister talked to her on the phone one day, and after she met her, she came to me and she goes, "Are you planning on keeping this one?" And I said, "I hope so." And she goes, "Well, you better, because if you don't, I want her for my friend."
Yeah.
So that's it. That's the kind of influence she's had. And on my kids, they actually call her mom.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, which that is amazing to me, because she has just totally taken them on. And she's taken me on and made me a better person. She hadn't made me, helped me be a better person.
Right. And when I met your wife, she's not that kind that, just kind of sits back timid and lets you do all the talking, whatever. She jumps right in, and she's very likable. She's very, very friendly right off and not in a weird way, but very, their conversation is right there, and she gets involved with it. And I think you did right. You did good, especially compared to the stories you've told.
Yeah. I'll be honest. And in a lot of ways, she reminds me of my first wife before the Depression.
Oh, that's cool.
But there's so much more added.
Yeah.
And that's the huge thing.
So she's been there through a lot of the stuff that you've gone through, and
not there while I was working. Because the funny thing is, we went out for about a year, and then then I retired. The week later, we got married.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, she didn't personally go through all of it, but she's heard all of it, seen everything, the remnants.
You've got a book she gets to read. And
she actually, that's funny, because she'd heard the book while I was going through it, and I was writing things down. And here's how great she was. I spent so much time in my office writing for about a year. Mm-hmm. And she let me slide on a lot of crap that I should have been doing around the house, and things but I'd run things past her, and she'd look at me going, "That happened? Yeah." "Are you okay?" I wasn't, but I'm getting better.
Right.
And, and we talk about it. Well, she actually, we went to Florida right before the Wounded Blue conference. And that's when she read my book as the book, because I just got author's copies a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. And she read through it, and I asked I want her support. I want her approval. So for anything. And she said, "Yeah, I didn't want to put it down, and I'm not a big reader."
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So there's one other story in your book, and it talks about you being lied to and betrayed.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, trauma is interesting, because we have a ton of trauma from the things we see at work and the things we deal with at work.
Right.
But then our leadership can cause trauma too. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, started with my FTO. That was trauma.
Sure.
I mean, I was stressed out of my gourd the whole time. But my first sergeant, he kind of was thinking outside the box, and the stuff he was coming up with was considered a little strange back in the day. Community-oriented policing. Come on, we're going to make that biggest switch. If you remember going through that and switching to community-oriented policing back in the early 90s, there was a lot of resistance.
I was in junior high and high school in the early 90s.
So, so was I. I should have been. But there was a lot of resistance to it. And anyway, so I was working his shift, and he would give me, I set up BAG groups, business advisory groups, SAG groups, school advisory groups, mm-hmm. Mall advisory groups, hotel advisory groups. I had all of those in my area. And so I'd get around, and I'd go get to know all the managers of the businesses and the hotels, the principals, and everybody at school. And
just really quick, your hotel advisory group, that's HAG?
Yeah. And I let them be.
All right.
So so I would go meet with them once a month, and I got a lot of good information, and it worked. He used that and got promoted to lieutenant. Mm-hmm. And then he later became a captain, and he was kind of my mentor. I tested for sergeant
8 or 9 times. The first time was when I was in detectives, and I was a young officer. I didn't deserve to be a sergeant, but I wanted to see what it was like, and I didn't even make the list, and I didn't expect to.
Right.
The second time, I made the top 5. They promoted one, and he was an experienced officer, way more time than I did. Good for him.
Right.
I didn't deserve that one either. But after that, I was in the running, and I really was in the running. Our policy at the time was you had 5 people to choose from, and if you promoted one, you moved number 6 into the list. And then we always had 5 to choose from, and we never knew what order the top 5 went. Well, the last time, we're all competitive. We all talk.
Right.
And we kind of figured out where we were on the list, who was, and we figured everybody pretty much agreed as top 5 that I was number 3. And sure enough, the guy we thought was first got promoted first. The guy that was second got promoted second. The guy that was 4th got promoted 3rd. The guy that was 5th got promoted 4th. And then they promoted number 6 and 7 also. We knew where they were, and left me on the list. And every time I got passed over for sergeant 14 or 15 times.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah. And every time I got passed over, I'd go to my mentor, the captain, and say, okay, what can I do better? What do I need to do so that I'm qualified?
Right.
I learned long ago not to be negative. Why didn't I get promoted? No. What can I do to make myself better?
Right.
And he'd give me an answer, and I would work on that until the next promotion process. And when I didn't get promoted, I go back and he gave me an answer. Well, the last time after they promoted everybody but me, I went in and he gave me an answer that I can't even remember what it was now, but it was weird. It just was different. And at the time, I was having problems with the department. I was working part-time for transit police. I got the permission, I had all the paperwork done and everything, and I got accused of not having the paperwork. Somehow it disappeared. It was in the file in the office, and I was a dumb shit. I didn't keep a copy.
Yeah.
But in an interview, when I went in and was talking to him about it, I didn't tell him, but I was getting really frustrated. Sorry, let's get back to promotion. Anyway, promotion, I went in and talked to him. Well, we'll get back. Yeah, that part. So I didn't get promoted, and he gave me a reason that didn't make any sense. Then they were giving me a bad time, tell me, they called me in and told me I had to quit my part-time job. Well, for the first time in my life, I was down to 2 jobs. That was it. And they told me I had to quit. And the chief told me that on a Tuesday, that I had to quit by Friday. And I kind of looked at him and said, you aren't even going to let me be professional, give 2 weeks. They've already got me scheduled. Are you kidding? Well, okay. Well, I didn't quit. I went and got an attorney because I had done it right. I actually got called into a lieutenant's office. 2 lieutenants sat me down, grilled me, played good cop, bad cop on me, and just started telling me I was a liar and a piece of shit. And I mean, they went off on me. And I didn't know if they did that or if they were told to do that. I don't know if they were trying to prove themselves, what the deal was. And anyway, I went into the captain's office and I said, what's going on? I turned that paperwork into you. But at this point I was frustrated enough, and it's against policy, but who gives a shit? They're trying to end my job. Sure. That I would have been bankrupt in 6 months if I lost 30% of my income.
Right.
And I had a tape recorder in my pocket, and he goes, yeah, I was really surprised when the chief approved that last year. I said, well, can't you remind him that he approved it? Oh, no, I can't do that. And I couldn't figure it out. Anyway, later on, a couple of weeks later, he looked at me and says, don't you have some federal time? And I said, yeah, I do. He says, so you could buy out your last year. I said, yeah, I could. He goes, maybe you ought to look at that. So I did. I looked at it, and I looked at transit police offered me a full-time job at the same salary I was making there. And I'm thinking, I'm working a job and a half right now. If I retire from here, take my 50% pay, go to transit for full-time pay, I'm working 1 job making the same money.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, I could do that. And so it cost me a bit of my retirement to buy it out, but I did, and I left. Shortly after that, the funny thing is,
I threatened to sue the department because they were going to make me quit. And I brought an attorney with me. The chief called me in for a meeting, and I brought an attorney, and he said, "Who's this?" I said, "My attorney." And he says, "Why do you have an attorney? You don't need one." And I said, "Obviously I do, because this is not right. I'm not a liar. I've never lied, and I'm not going to put up with it." Right. And the attorney finally says, "Okay, I'll tell you what, we're going to change the policy, and you can keep your part-time job. And this is why you pay attorneys." So I said, "Okay, great." And the attorney says, "I'll expect a letter on that in my desk on Monday morning," because it was on a Friday. And here's my card, and gave it to the chief. And then as we're walking away, and then the attorney turns around and says, "Okay, and what about next year? Because you have to have it renewed every year." Yeah. That was my point, is if I lied to get it, why would I turn in paperwork to renew it?
Right. That's true.
Which is what started the whole thing. And the chief goes, "Oh, okay." Anyway, so that may have had something to do with getting passed over also.
I see.
Yeah, because that was right when I was going through the sergeant stuff. But anyway, after I retired, I left, and I found out that there was only one person that spoke up against me on promotion process. Only one person. And they went along with him every time, and that was my mentor.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't find that out till after I left, but yeah. And I verified it with 3 other people that were in those meetings.
So was he playing both sides? Is that what was going on, or?
I don't know. I think the chief had a little bit of a temper, or, he'd snap and then he'd come back. And in my opinion, I think what happened was when that process of my part-time job, the paperwork disappearing, I think the captain who I turned it into probably didn't turn it in. And that would have come out and made him look bad.
See,
that's only my guess, though.
Yeah. Well, things are what they are, I guess. And
they are.
And so then you go working at the transit police at that point?
Yeah, I went to transit for 6 years. And that was a ride. I got more foot chases and fights there in 6 than I did in 20 at the others.
Oh, wow. But pretty fun, pretty full of action. So did you have to start all over, go through FTO and everything with them? Or, oh no, you'd already been working part-time for them.
Yeah, I'd been working part-time, so I'd already been through that. And they just moved me straight over, gave me the same pay I was making, topped out. And it was a good ride.
It's pretty good. And so you're now retired, and a week after retiring, you get married.
Yeah.
And you are developing a thing, because I would assume when you retired, did you have an idea what you're going to do? Were you going to be one of those guys that says, "Hey, I'm going to go work security at a hospital," or something like that? You had that. You had that option. But did you have this idea that you were going to go and to have a class and develop a kind of a program in order to?
I knew that I didn't want guys to make the same stupid choices I made.
Right.
And if I could, and I still wanted to make a difference. I know I made a difference in my career someplace along the line with different people. I know I did. I questioned that one time, and I had a few people come forward and tell me, "Yeah, you did." And so I know I did. Right. I'm still not done. I'm not in the box yet. Until I am, I'm going to do everything I can to make a difference. And I thought, one thing I can do is take these things that I've learned, and if I can share them with others so that they don't have to get divorced, don't want to commit suicide, or reduce the effects of PTSD, because everybody's going to get PTSD. That's what we do. That's a job we pick.
Right.
But we all picked it. I won't say all, because I can't speak for everybody, but the majority of us picked it for a noble reason, to make a difference in our communities.
Right.
And I'm just expanding my community, and I still get to make a difference. Instead of just my city now, I get to go do it nationwide.
That's pretty cool. You get to actually have those experiences that we were talking about.
Yeah.
You get to go out and do things and see people, meet new people, and come on Goofy Guys' podcasts and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. I had a couple experiences at transit that kind of illuminated me on this. Because it was while I was at transit, I started making the changes in me. Like, I had one guy, he was probably about 6'2", 270 pounds, big guy. And on the transit, we get a check for tickets. And I love doing that. It's a numbers game. The more tickets you check, the more people you find that don't have tickets, the more people that don't have tickets, the more people you find with warrants, the more people with warrants, the more times you go to jail. And that, so I'd go through the trains going, tickets, please, tickets, please, tickets, please. And, just thank you, going through the motions and just check. So yeah, anyway, I was rushing through the trains, tickets, and hurrying all the time. And I got this guy, and the policy at the time was, because we were by ourselves a lot, was get out on the platform. Because if you ever try to catch a moving train in a car, it just doesn't work. And that way, if we're on the platform, if we needed help, then people could at least get to us. So I'm standing there talking to him, and I realize he's lying like a mother. That never happens, right?
No, they don't ever lie.
So I realized that, but I can't quite figure it out. But luckily I had a really good dispatcher that day, and she figured it out. And he'd given me his last name first, just his first name last, and then reverse numbers into date of birth. And she figured it out. And turns out he's wanted, had a second-degree felony warrant for aggravated assault on a police officer. And I had an ear mic because I hate the speakers where everybody can hear everything that you're hearing.
Right.
And so I had an ear mic, and I was listening, and I gone, oh, okay. So now I call for back. I said 78, please. And that way back's on the way, and that way he didn't know. And I'm stalling like a mother for backup to get there, because this guy's a big guy. I went over the citation after that, what I hadn't done slowly. Then I went back and recovered it to make sure I had everything correct really slowly. And then I accidentally misunderstood a couple of things, so I had to respell. And I stalled as best I could. And finally, it got to the point where I had to take action. So I said, okay, dude, you're under arrest. Turn around, put your hands behind your back, and you know where the fight starts.
Right.
When the cuffs come out, and the fight started. And my sunglasses in my pocket went flying. My cell phone in my pocket went flying. My work cell phone and scanner that I used to scan tickets went flying. Everything that was on me, if it wasn't strapped down 3 times, went flying. And then he backed up and turned around and faced me. Or well, he was facing me, but he backed up and kind of squared off a little bit. And I pulled my taser out. Never used my taser other than practice in my life. Top prong hit him right where it's supposed to hit him.
Right.
And I'm thinking, oh, sweet. And unfortunately, when I pulled the trigger, nothing happened because the bottom prong had bounced off of his 2-inch wide leather belt.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So now I'm going, oh, shit. And he turned to run. And he's a big guy, so I knew he wasn't going to run fast. And I ran like 4 miles, 8-minute pace every other day. I was a little older, but I wasn't going to let some young buck beat me. Period. Right. Told you I'm competitive. I will not lose. So I'm chasing him. And as I'm about a half block later, I see him look over his shoulder, and I'm thinking, okay, the fight's coming now pretty quick. And so then I got thinking, I don't want to be in front of him, because if he puts that weight on me, he's going to crush me.
Right.
And his arms are big enough. If he gets them around me, I'm in trouble. So I thought the best place for me to be is on his back. So the next time he looked over his shoulder at me, and as he looked forward, I hit him from behind and just took him down. Perfect form tackle. Nah, probably not, but it worked. Anyway, so I'm on the ground there with him, and I'm just staying behind him and rolling and waiting for backup to show up. He all of a sudden, this truck driver pulled up, and he rolled his window down and says, "Are you okay?" And I kind of looked up and said, I could use some help. And the driver actually jumped out and helped me out.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was excited. I was happy as hell on that one. He jumped out and grabbed an arm. I grabbed the arm, and then I reached for my cuffs and realized they were still back on the train platform where the fight started. So I just looked at the driver and I said, "You got a few minutes? Because I got backup coming. Can you just hang on to him with me for a few minutes?" And he says, "Oh yeah, no problem." So a detective from the city that we were in at that point rolled up, and we got one set of cuffs, put them on, but this guy's arms were so big we couldn't get them together.
Right.
So we had to wait about 3 more minutes for my other backup to show up with another set of cuffs, and then we finally got him into custody. And that was the process that I went through. Well, interestingly enough, about a year later, I've gone through some of the things to reopen and look at myself. This is when all that process was going on. And I ran into a guy on the train, again, checking tickets. This time we were working partners because they had us working partners now because we'd had too many fights and stuff. And this guy was wasn't little, but he wasn't a great big guy either. And he didn't have a ticket. And so my partner said, hey, you mind if I go to the next car and check tickets there? And I said, not a problem. So I started writing this guy a citation. Well, you can't move from car to car on that train. You have to get to a station to switch cars.
I see.
And I'm talking to the guy. But in the meantime, what I'd done is instead of just hurrying through, rushing, tickets, thank you. I slowed down and I took my sunglasses off. I started looking at people in the eye. I'd scan their waist, but I said, tickets, please. And then I said, thank you. Have a great day. And I actually started connecting with people a little bit more.
Right.
And even though that slowed me down, the funny thing is my arrest stats didn't lower. They stayed where they were.
Mm-hmm.
My customer service stats went sky high.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because I was talking with people actually, and this guy, he looks up at me as I'm going through the citation. I don't know about you guys when you do a citation, but I always say pretty much the same thing so I don't forget anything.
Yeah, I have a spiel.
Outline.
Myself. Yeah.
And so I'm going through it, and he looks at me and says, "You're making this difficult." And I said, "What?" He goes, "You're being too nice. You're making this hard." And I said, "Making what hard?" And he looked up at me and he says, "I was going to kill a cop today and hopefully get killed doing it." Yeah, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I took a half step back because I'm a couple feet from him, but way too close for me to do anything. And I said, "And how were you going to do that?" He says, "I have a knife." And I said, "Do me a favor, and I appreciate you being honest with me. Do me a favor and keep your hands on your knees where I can see them, okay?" He goes, "Okay." And I moved behind him. And I said, in which pocket? He says, "My right pocket." I reached in and I pulled out this freaking butcher knife that had like a 6-inch blade. It was so sharp, I was afraid to put it in my cargo pocket because I thought it was going to cut through. And I knew, man, on my vest, that wouldn't have done anything for me.
Right.
And then he says, "I have another one too." And I said, "In the other pocket?" "Yeah." And I took out a screwdriver that had been sharpened, a shank. And it was one of the big ones with about, one hand, but about 4 or 5 inch long, whatever you call it, tang, right. I guess.
Right.
But anyway, yeah. So turned out this guy was actually pissed off at one of our officers who treated him like crap a few days before when he wrote him a ticket. And that guy was actually only one station up from where I took this guy off the train. And he was a young guy, real gung-ho, just didn't deal with people real well right now. He hadn't figured it out.
Sure.
But what's funny, couple backstories on that. This guy, instead of taking him to jail, he's suicidal. "I hope I get killed doing it." I went, okay. We called and had him sent up to the university psych ward. And then he ended up going to Arizona for 1.5 years for treatment. And about 2 years later, he was on the train talking to my sergeant at the time and said, "Hey, is Williams working today?" He says, "Yeah, he is." He says, "Tell him thank you for saving my life." He'd gone back down, gotten on his meds, and now he was working back up in an office in Salt Lake making, buku bucks, 6 figures plus, and doing good. And then the backstory on the other guy, which was interestingly enough. Oh, and what I point out with that is the only difference in those two scenarios, there's only one common factor in those two scenarios, and that's me. And the difference is the way I learned how to connect with people, just like I do with my wife now, which I didn't do with my ex-wives. And so I learned to connect, and I learned to open up and communicate and let them see me for me.
Right.
I'm not just this robot in blue. The funny thing is, I kind of started that process, and as I got the big guy, as I was getting him in the car to get him taken to jail, I told the sergeant, "Hey, I got to run back to the train platform and see if I can get my stuff because it's all over the place up there." And as I turned to walk away, this homeless guy that I had met a year before and talked with a couple of times came running up, and he had everything that had come off my uniform and body in his arms. He says, "Hey, people are taking your stuff, but I got it for you."
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because I treated him with respect. And I talked with him, and in other words, I had started the process just prior to that incident, but I was not, just barely starting. And then over the next year, I was able to really shift it into who I am.
Right.
And connect with people. And that's what I do now.
Right. Where you just want to help people get through their issues. You want to get to that point where that you screwed up, and you've navigated through that ability to get through to the other side. And like I said at the beginning, at the very beginning, where we have all these things, we're bright-eyed, and we go through traumas, and we go through all these things, and how to navigate getting up to it, how to navigate through it. And then what's on the other side? What's the other side look like? How does getting through that look?
Yeah.
And so how does that look? Where does that look for you or anybody, for that instance?
To start off with, retirement isn't the end. It's simply a new beginning of a new chapter.
Uh-huh.
So have something to do when you retire. I mean, I know a bunch of guys that have, the second FTO that I had when back he was a hell of an officer and honest, good guy. And he went through so much crap that when he retired, his wife divorced him. He locked himself in this dark apartment. And I heard that he died a few months ago.
Oh, really?
And he's probably in his early mid 50s, maybe. And, but he kind of started having mental issues and things. He locked himself away. So many of my friends, fellow workers have turned into alcoholics, start drinking and just don't stop. And I looked every week seems like I get something that somebody I know in the business has died. And then when I get to learn the backstory, it's like horrible. So the thing is, we have to have something we want to do, and what, if that's buying an RV and traveling the country, great. Or if it's going out and teaching like I do. I found out I'm a pretty good trainer over the years.
Uh-huh.
And I finally figured out how to take something and this was given to me. I mean, it was so given to me that I cannot pass it up. When I wrote my program, that just came. It took a few months to develop things, but It was there. When I wrote my book, this one just flowed. I started a second book and I hit a roadblock. So I started a third one because that one kept coming to mind. And I found out I enjoy writing, and I think I'm pretty good. I don't know, because I can't critique my own books without bias.
Sure. Well, there's a ton of people that you have a lot of folks with this book that just talk it up. They're like, oh, this is good. This is Cop's book. This is, a lot of good stuff.
That's what I hope is, if I can't talk to people, they can read the book and they can, because I share everything. I'm wide open and I share everything in the book. I have to, and there's a few things that have come in after it was written, but
right.
that someday. But have something to do. My wife and I, we love visiting our grandkids. In fact, we were actually talking about moving up to Washington. I don't know what we're going to do yet. We're still trying to figure out what we want to do when we grow up.
Right.
But but it's nice because we're in a place where we have so many options, and that's what I'm enjoying now. For those of you getting close to retirement, make some plans, have some things to do. If it's travel the world. We have a place in Florida, and that's where I don't like to shovel snow anymore. My shoulders hurt too much. I have aches and pains, too many fights, much stuff.
Right.
So I try to go where it's warm in the winter.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I can say, although that hasn't worked out quite yet. So
yeah, they say that, a guy, you take like military vets and they come back from overseas or whatever, and there was 22 vets dying a day of suicide. And and that stuff doesn't just come because they hit their thumb with a hammer while they're building a treehouse with their kids or something like that. They don't get just so upset at that point. That stuff comes from just the PTSD that you're talking about. And there's a and I learned this recently, the difference between PTSD in PTSD, which is just an injury, is time. The longer you sit in that, it becomes the disorder. And so those guys, they're coming back and they don't have a mission. They are trusted with billions of dollars worth of equipment. They are trusted with lives. They are trusted with their buddies trust them with their lives. They're doing something. They're accomplishing goals, and they're doing things that is they see are good, you know.
Yeah.
And then they come back, and you know, maybe they got some, you know, a boss that's younger than them that doesn't know how to lead, and he's being, you know, he's being disrespectful to him, or whatever the case is, and they go through all these different things, or they have all this life, and they see the social media, or they see the media in general, or they see all these things, and they're not able to focus down on something, and they're just trying to figure out where they fit, because they've been a badass for a long time, and now all of a sudden they're not even getting respected from the person they're standing in a grocery line with, you know. Yeah. And so they're unable to focus. Once they find that focus, and there's studies and stuff, that once they find a focus and they find a new mission to go struggle after and work towards, there is that much less of a chance that there will be any kind of PTSD or suicide or, you know, mental health problems because of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. My daughter spent a year in Iraq. My son spent a year in Afghanistan, and my son got blown up over there. He lived, but 3 years in the hospital, 35 surgeries so he could sort of walk. And he was 20.
Oh man.
You know, and he and I have had tons of discussions on trauma, and thank God he's a smart kid, smarter than I ever was or will be.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had setting a mission. I like the way you put that. Setting a mission is critical to survive these things.
Right.
And again, after the communication, to get it out and work with it and deal with it. And that doesn't mean sitting there and crying in front of a counselor. It means sharing it. I'll tell you what was cathartic for me was when I wrote my book. Up to that point, I was having probably 3-4 nightmares a month, you know, almost one a week. And after I wrote my book, I maybe have 1 or 2 a year now. And what's funny about it is the mind's an amazing thing. It'll hold so much garbage, but it knows how much we can hold. There are things that I have forgotten that are coming back in now because I've created space for it to move in.
Right.
Instances that are not in my book because when I wrote it, I didn't remember them. I had blocked them out. And so the mind will work its best to take care of us, but I can only do so much in by getting it out.
Right.
And, you know, like you say, the average officer has 800 major traumatic events in a 20-year career, and that's only 1 a week. So I think that's a very conservative number.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in the big cities. And look now, the trauma that's being created by the betrayals of the politicians.
Yeah. You don't even, we have issues. The first issue that everybody talks about is, you know, a police officer, they can be shot or they can get run over or whatever the case is. And when you go to work, you think about that, and that's okay. I could die on any call or whatever. Then you take a step back, and then you're talking about just frustrations because of, you know, it may not even be an administrative thing, and everybody on your side is working, you know, to help things get better, but you arrest somebody for doing, you know, whatever, a case where they've hurt somebody really bad or whatever, and it goes to court and that person does not get found guilty. There's no justice. And you see that family being torn apart because they're either the DA decided not to pursue charges, or there was some technicality in court, or whatever the case is. And now all of a sudden, so you're feeling betrayed there. Like, I just spent, you know, however long doing this case, and now it just went to nowhere. And that doesn't happen all the time, but that is a possibility that can happen. But then there is the other side of, you feel maybe betrayed by your fellow officers, or you felt your brothers, or not just police, but, you know, whether it's in your church or whether it's in your civics group or whatever it's, you know, whatever you do. It might be your friends or family, and you get betrayed there. So you're struggling in this area. You're struggling in this area. You got these things. You got all these things. And now all of a sudden, the media is coming out and the politicians are coming out. Oh, the police are bad. The police are. You know what? You guys are limiting our ability to commit or to do these, to enforce these laws, and now you're not giving us an opportunity to do it right, and people are being hurt, and then you're blaming us for, oh, you didn't do your job. Then you're limiting us being able to, enforce something one way or another by taking away equipment or not letting us have whatever, or limiting budgets. It doesn't matter. And it goes and goes and goes. And then all of a sudden you now have these officers who are struggling because they don't see any bright spots, because everything is, there's a dim spot everywhere they look, whether it's church, home, work, and they're in their own head.
Yeah. And that's when the PTSD gets worse. That's when the suicidal stuff starts. I mean, think about it. Up in, I think it was Seattle, they banned, it's probably Portland. They banned pepper spray.
Yeah.
And they banned riot shields. And basically they gave the officers the opportunity. The only choice they have is either go hands-on or pull a trigger.
Right.
There's nothing in between.
And then they get ostracized for, oh, you guys are heavy on the trigger pulling.
Yeah.
Well, you give me no other option. That's a tool in my tool belt, but I can't always be using a hammer when I need to screw in a screw, or I need to, drop a plumb line or something. It's a hammer is good, but it's not the tool that I need for certain jobs. And so,
what I'm grateful for though? The last few days have shown something.
What's that?
The public's starting to go, no, we're not putting up with it anymore. Minnesota, they voted down banning the police department.
Yeah.
So the public is starting to not be the silent majority anymore. Mm-hmm. And I'm amazed at how many people that I since I'm not in uniform anymore, I still look like a cop, but I don't really act like one anymore.
Right.
And maybe I better rephrase that.
You do.
I get to share a quick story. My wife and I had been married about 2.5 years, and we went into a restaurant, and she looks at me and picked a table, and I started to sit down, and she looked at me and says, "Is there any chance that I can sit somewhere where I'm not just looking at a wall?" Because I was putting my back against the wall, and I didn't even know I was doing it. Yeah. So we talked, and we worked it out. And so now, on the way in, she goes, "Are you okay not being against the wall?" And I said, "Yeah, but let's take this table so we have sideways view, both of us, of the door." We worked it out.
Yeah, we had gone on a cruise one time, and we were on this cruise ship, and my wife likes to sit at the pool. She loves the pool, and she can be at the pool. If we go on vacation, she could stay at the pool the whole time, and she'll be happy as a clam. Give her a book and a drink, and she'll stay there between meals. She might even miss lunch. We're like, "Oh, I'll just stay right here. I'm fine." Well, I am not that way. I'm completely opposite. I can sit there for a little bit. I'll go get in the pool. I'll get back out. I'll go run over to the bar or whatever, and I'll get back out. I'll go get some food and come back, and I got to run to the room really quick, and I'll come back. Oh, I'm going to check something out. Oh, I just saw something. And if they have those little games going on, I always want to go get involved with the group games that they're doing and stuff like that. So she's there, she's laying by the pool, and I decide, I'm going to get up again. So I go over to the bar, and I'm kind of standing at the bar, I order my drink, and they're getting it together, and I'm waiting. And this guy comes walking up next to me and says, "So how long you been in?" I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, where do you work?" I said, what are you talking about?" He goes, "What department are you with?" I said, "Excuse me?" And I don't know this guy from Adam. And he goes, "Yeah." I said, well, and I don't know how to, I'm trying to be a smart aleck, but I'm like, I guess I tell him, and he goes, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought so." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, I've been a cop for 25 years. I can spot a cop from a mile away. I'm like, "Really? What?" So I had to ask him. I said, "So what gave it away?" Just the way you walk, just the way you're always looking around. You can't sit still. You're always, He goes, it's just who you are, man. If I know it because that's me and I see it, but I'm not, I don't think a lot of other people see it. He goes, but I recognize it because I've seen it and I know it and it makes sense to me. And I said, oh, okay. So it's kind of funny. You can spot your own and you know who you are.
Oh yeah. I get to share a cruise story with you. We went on a cruise with a bunch of buddies. They were all cops and federal agents. And the first day we're there and we're just sitting in some lounge chairs up on the deck because we aren't checked into rooms and stuff yet. We're just kind of waiting. And three security guys walk over put their railing with their backs to us. And you know when you're being watched.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretending not to watch you, but watching
you. Just a little look over the shoulder sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Or one to turn to talk to the other, and the guy that's looking at him in our direction is looking over his shoulder at us.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I went over and I said, why are you guys watching us? Oh, we're not watching you. Yeah, you are. Uh-huh. We're all cops and federal agents. We know when we're being watched. And then he laughed and goes, oh, no, we're not. And then they all left and we never saw them again. But I think it goes back to those mannerisms. We're around, we're looking around, we're scoping things, checking things out.
Right. And yeah, we're all, it's a hypervigilance thing. We're always looking, always keeping an eye out for things. But yeah, anyways, it's just, there's a goodness to it. Just knowing, what you can do and who you can become if you decide that you have a mission to accomplish and you can focus down on something and it's going to change who you are depending on what it is. How are you going to start treating people, what you're looking for? Because I mean, there is a level of you're trying to either, if let's say you have a job that you want to do and you need to solicit people to get them involved with what you're doing. Let's say that this podcast was, I made millions of dollars. I did the Joe Rogan style and I made a bunch of money with it. And, and it is not, for those of you that listen, and I'm not Joe Rogan and I'm not making $1 million on this. I think I'm going the opposite direction, but
equipment's expensive.
That's right. The other side of it is, so with that, I mean, with that, you have to be able to talk to people a certain way, and you're always trying to get, you might be trying to get something, not in a way that you're trying to manipulate them, but you're trying to get something so you can, hey, would you be willing to, do this and work with us? And yeah. So you got to do a little bit of sales. So you have to have a little bit of a personality. So that'll change the way you start dealing with people. Right now, as a police officer, I don't necessarily have to try to make sales, I mean, maybe you sell a ticket or whatever, but you kill them with kindness. You still be nice to people, even though in the back of your head, you're like, I want to throttle you. But you have to treat people differently depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. But sometimes there's a point where you go beyond that and you just treat people right because they're people too. And you know that you may have struggled in your life at some point. You don't know if they're struggling or not. And why treat people bad if there's no need to? There's absolutely no need to. And
think about this. It's a mindset thing about the way we treat people. Mm-hmm. And when we go to work at the beginning of the day, what is our primary goal? And every cop I know is giving me the same answer.
Come home at the end of the day.
Come home safe at the end of the day.
Right.
So when you go in with that mindset, what are you assuming about the day?
That it's just you're going to go home at the end of the day. Nothing's going to happen or that something dangerous is going to happen and you're going to make sure it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Because you're being vigilant, the hypervigilance we talked about, and that's saved a lot of lives. But do you remember the saying, what goes around comes around? Yeah.
And I am a firm believer of energy. What you put out comes back to you. What goes around comes around. Same thing.
Right.
So if we're going out with a thought that something bad is going to happen, what's going to happen?
Something bad's going to happen.
Yeah, something bad's going to happen. And, I was a ship magnet when I went to work. Everybody knew, the sergeant knew, my crew knew, my dispatchers knew something was going to happen every day. And it did pretty much. And I was actually proud of that.
Right.
But now as I've shifted some things and as I've looked at things, all of a sudden, after I changed the way I did things, I quit getting in foot chases and fights. Funny. And it's because I shifted the way I looked. I didn't think I want to go home safe at the end of the day. What I changed it to is I want to make a difference in somebody's life today. Is there a whole different energy to that?
Right. Right.
And it could be my own life. And in like the case with the car driving at me, it was. And in other cases, the guy with the knives, I made a huge difference for him, but it made a difference for me too. I didn't have to fight off a knife attack.
That's true. Yeah.
And you know as well as I do, you've studied martial arts, I believe.
Yeah, we talked
about
it.
And fighting and stuff. And if you end up in a knife fight, you're going to get cut. Doesn't matter whether you win or lose, you're still going to get cut.
Yeah.
And, you know, those are things that all of a sudden I didn't have to do anymore because I changed the way I looked at things. Not everybody's a potential problem, but that doesn't mean they're all a problem. And I look now and I'm wondering how many things on the street are happening because we assume they're going to happen or the possibilities there. And so we treat it like it's going to happen.
You're right. You know, it's that I know there's a name for it and I forget what it is, but you go into something with the presupposition that it's going to happen and it's going to happen this way and you want it. And it's not always going to be that way, but you have this idea, you're going to start reacting to everything as if it's happening that way. I remember years ago, my kids were little, I used to coach their soccer team. And there was this mom, and that there would always be a drama with her. There'd always be issues with her. And I started looking back at her once, and she had moved around to everybody. And there was always drama with some other parent or whomever on the thing. And I got to looking back once she'd done the drama with me early, and then she was moving on to other parents in regards to, you know, getting snacks or whatever the case is. And there's just always drama. And I'm looking at her. And then I was driving and I was watching how she was interacting with people. And I was driving to one of the games one day. And it was an away game. And we get to it and the kids are kind of in the back just doing whatever they're doing. And I'm just driving, it was quiet. And I'm thinking back to all that stuff, not looking forward to seeing this mom just like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be so dramatic. I started thinking about how she was dealing with all these other people. And I noticed that she would always go into the situation expecting the drama. And I remember hearing conversations she had that she said, it's going to be like this is going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And so I started seeing her, how she was doing that. She would walk in and I watched her get out of her car. She's with her family. Her husband he's in tow and he's beat down completely. And he's carrying all the chairs and the ice chest and all this different stuff. And she's, you know, the soccer mom. And I noticed that her whole thing was she walked into the situation looking for the drama, looking for something to happen. And then if it wasn't happening, she would go make sure that it did happen. If, you know, nobody's paying attention to her, nothing's happening and everything's doing great until she shows up. And all of a sudden there's just a, you know, volcano erupting somewhere. And I started looking at her intent was, I'm going to go make this drama happen. I'm going to go make this problem occur because if I don't do it, it's not going to happen. Well, of course, but nobody wants it to happen. But she would be the first one to complain about it too. Now, whether
that wasn't a conscious intent.
Right. I don't think she knew she wanted drama, but I think that's how she thrived. I think she thrived on it. She needed it.
Yeah.
So, it's just kind of weird. It's kind of weird how things grow like that. But so as far as your growth and the next step in the evolution of Glen Williams, what are we looking at? What's coming up next?
Well, COVID kind of killed my teaching.
Yeah.
And I'm rebuilding that again. So if anybody out there has a department would love to get in touch with me, I'd love to come put my 8-hour course on for you. And we'll talk about relationships and communication and and self-accountability and perception and all kinds of stuff.
Do you do like a husband-wife sort of thing? Like
I don't, because I have some people that share traumatic events that might not share with their spouses there. But I teach them how to take that traumatic event and rephrase it so they can safely share it with their spouse.
I see.
And that's one part of the course. Then my book, right now, I'm really working on marketing my book. It comes out on December 14th. And so I'm really working on getting that out there, because if I can make a difference in one person's life, I still win.
Right.
And that's that. Then I actually started 2 other books, and I'm going to travel around and teach, and I'm going to write. And I have one nonfiction book that's about growing old with diabetes, but I kind of hit a roadblock on that. But I have a fiction book about a cop, of course, that will turn into a 5-book series.
That's pretty cool. You know, yeah. I had another guest on here, Jeff Hewitt, and he's a fitness guy. He's a teacher, but he's a fitness guy, totally into fitness. And he just is always talking about how he doesn't let his diabetes, because his diabetes really is very prominent in his life. However, he doesn't let that keep him from doing things he wants to do and being the healthy guy and the motivation for his students and his kids and stuff like that. So
good for him. I'd like to meet him, because I'm the same way. You know, I've had it used against me, and I've always used it as a force to make me better.
Right.
And I'll tell you, it's kicked. You know, there's a story in my book about how it kicked my butt one day, and that was the incident that my captain used against me for 17 years.
Really?
Yeah. I call it my magical mystery tour.
Yeah, that episode with Jeff Hewitt, that'll be episode 20. So
okay. I'm writing that down.
Let me make sure that was 20. Yes. So it's episode 20, and he's a great guy, and he just loves his family stuff. It turns out that his wife was one of my daughter's teachers, and you know, years before. And so it's kind of cool how it kind of all comes back around and stuff like that. So
yeah, what's funny is, you know, diabetes has obviously been a big part of my life since I was 15, and I've been told I couldn't do so many things because I have diabetes. I went and done them anyway.
Yeah.
And did them better than the person who told me I couldn't. And you met my dog.
Yeah.
He's my diabetic alert dog, because I don't feel my sugars drop anymore.
Oh, that's cool. My dog is there's no food in my bowl. Dog. Yeah, she'll let me know. She'll let me know when there's no food in her bowl. I have to remind her that it's not feeding time. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, but it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So
in fact, if you haven't read it, you'll have to read. I think it's chapter 10.
Chapter 10. I'm going to get a, because like you said, this book's not even out yet. And I happen to have
it's on ebook.
Oh, okay. I happen to have a hard copy in my hot little hands right here. And so
where did you steal that from?
I don't know, but I've got a little bit of writing on the inside by some guy whose name looks very similar to the guy on the front. So we'll see. But no, it's awesome. And the book, you can get this book, you can pre-order it on Amazon
and on Barnes and Noble.
And it's a good book. There's so much to it. And if there are production folks telling this needs to be a major feature and not a documentary, that then the question lies, who plays Glen Williams?
Ooh,
you haven't thought about that, have you?
No, actually I had not. Clint's too old now.
Right. Could have been Glen. Liam Neeson.
Oh man,
he's not tough.
Yeah, can't be somebody too macho, because I never was real macho.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Yeah. So I will look forward to your answer on that. So because you also got to run it by your wife. She's got to make sure he's okay.
Yeah, you know, I'd go somebody along the lines of Tom Cruise, but not Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
So something kind of similar to that.
Oh, Keanu Reeves. Got it.
Oh yeah, there you go. There you go.
Because he's getting to, he could even do that. Yeah. You never know. He's probably a better shot. I've seen John Wick. So anyways, for those of you guys that are listening to the show and you're like, oh, these guys are good, I like this. Or if you haven't, you can share this information with everybody else, with all your friends, your family, everybody. You can get a hold of us and see all the, I always put a link and everything to every episode on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, obviously. There is the What's a Hero podcast on Facebook, and I'm on LinkedIn. You can also go to our website. It's the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. And on there is every episode. You can listen to it right on the website. Or if you don't want to use your bandwidth, or you don't want to use your service or anything like that, download it. And by download, there are links to every podcast platform on the website, and they can take you right there, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Amazon or on Podcast Addict or whatever the podcast platform you like to listen to stuff on. Go there, that'll have it there, and you can download it from there. Downloading actually works pretty good because that gives us some tangible numbers to work with, and it helps out. So I would say get that book, Bridging the Gap, an inside look at communications and relationships after traumatic events. And it's a good read. It comes highly recommended, and order it. You can pre-order it, or you can get the ebook. You can read it on your Kindle or your phone or whatever, however some people like to read it. I like to have a tangible one in my hands. That's just what it is. You can dog ear the pages, you can write notes, you can even get it signed by the author if you happen to meet him. So
if they wanted to message me through my website, I'd give them a discount and sign book.
And so what is your website?
GlenWilliamsPublicSpeaker.com. And they can email me at info@GlenWilliamsPublicSpeaker.com.
There you go. And you can get a hold of Glenn, and he can, and not only that, you can probably ask him questions and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. And, if you found him to be somebody that's, interesting or approachable to you, he'd be more than happy to say, if you ask him a question, if you're a young officer and you're trying to learn stuff, he can even point out, hey, don't be stupid, don't do this or whatever. And it all comes back, it's all about, like I said earlier, our story is it's about us, but it's not for us. And everything that we do is for other people. And it should be, because people are going to learn from us one way or another. And they're going to be watching us. They're going to know who you are based off of how you treat people and how you are. So, Glenn, do you have any final comments you'd like to make for these fine folks that like to listen to the What's a Hero podcast?
No, I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you today. And say, if you do message me, if it's PTSD or mental health related, I can give you a referral because I have contacts all over. And since that's kind of my specialty now, but I'm not a doctor.
Right.
So, or, a license to do that. But I can give you, in fact, if you look at the back of my book, there's a resource area there for many of those things, but there's a whole bunch that have come out since the book was printed. That basically the last chapter is resources and things that you can do, things to help your mental health and wellness, and just take care of yourselves, guys, because your bosses don't care. You're just a number, and that's sad, but it's true. The people are starting to care, but they don't know what you're going through, and so you've got to take care of yourself and your family.
Yeah. So if people want to get a hold of you and get a hold of you to bring your program to them or their class or their department or whatever, they just go through GlenWilliamsPublicSpeaker.com.
Yeah, they can do that. Again, that same email, info@GlenWilliamsPublicSpeaker.com, and they'll message me. I also have a gal that gets me booked for places. I have to look hers up off the top here. It's in the back of the book, but let me find it. Yeah, Kate O'Donnell at Public Grants and Training Initiatives. I work through her, and her phone number is 847-886-8255. 875-3620. And she does a lot of my bookings. In fact, I actually interviewed to teach at Chicago PD. So hopefully that one will come through in the spring because of Kate.
Yeah, that's cool. And if we know anything, Chicago probably needs it.
Yeah, they have it on both ends. They're getting nailed, and that's sad.
Yeah.
So,
well, Glenn, I have been nothing but pleased to have you on the show, and I've really enjoyed our time speaking. And you are welcome back at any time, and we can chit chat further. Maybe after those other books get out, and we can go over those ones too, and that would be kind of cool.
Oh, absolutely. You'll love the fiction. When I get done with that.
That'd be cool. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, for Glen Williams, I've been Ken Frownfelter. And just remember, without people like Glen and the police officers that go to work every day to try to make sure that you're safe, firefighters, the EMTs, the nurses, the teachers who bend over backwards for other people, those veterans that are over there overseas or even home and trying to find their next mission, whoever those guys are, those girls are, they're the ones that really make this country move. And without them, we wouldn't be able to do the things that we want to do. We would have to always be doing the things we have to do. And so with that, I show the most appreciation that I can to them. I love the fact that there are people willing to stand up for other people and serve other people for no other reason than because it's the right thing to do. And I'm very proud to call many of those people my friends. I'm very proud to be one of them myself. And without them, like I said, we wouldn't have the country we have. So my hat is off to you, and I thank you so much. Glenn, thanks for being on the show. And for Glen Williams, I've been Ken Frownfelter. This has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.